95% of people will tell you they're self-aware. And self-aware is knowing how your behavior affects other people. Only 15% actually are.
Yeah.
And so usually when I go to work with a client, first thing we look at is lead management, like right out of the gate. How fast are we responding to web leads? It's, 24 hours, 2 hours. It's rarely
Painful.
ever is it 2 minutes. And in sales departments in particular, and leads come in, and we have this very casual, nonchalant, whatever. And I'm looking at them like, I would lose my mind and fire people. Hey, this is a $35,000 wholesale flip, whatever. And your people are just like, let me get back to them. And you guys aren't losing your mind right now?
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us for today's episode of Disruptors. Today we have Austin McCurdy with Sharper Business Solutions, and he flew in from Chicago to talk about the biggest difference between average operators and elite businesses. And Austin's actually coming here because he's actually coaching me and my team. Guys, I'm on a mission to create 100 millionaires. The information on the show alone is enough to help you become a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. If you'll take consistent action, you'll become one. Guys, if you get value out of the show, please hit that subscribe button. That way we can all grow together. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So first question is, what was your life like right before you got into business?
Well, I was a school teacher for 6 years. Yeah, 6 years before that.
Yeah.
So a lot different. It wasn't a 9 to 5 job. It was like an 8 to 3:30 job.
Okay.
And I taught in the private sector. So we only had school 4 days a week.
What do you mean taught in the private sector?
So I taught in a private school,
Okay.
Christian private school.
Okay.
So we only had school Tuesday to Friday.
Interesting.
Yep. We had every Monday off. So I had a 3-day weekend every weekend, every holiday, every summer. I got paid the entire time. So it was like a very laid back, easygoing. I don't really know. The more I talk about it, I don't know why I left it.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering the same thing too.
Yeah, I don't know either, except, you just don't make any money at it.
Yeah.
And so, and that's what I went to school for. And what's really cool is I fast forward to where I'm at now in life, and I get to use all of that knowledge that I got from teaching. Because really, in coaching, and we'll get into it tomorrow, it's a lot of it's knowledge transfer. Especially when we're doing an initial implementation of the REI's curriculum with a client, it's training, it's teaching in that.
And we're going to be talking about today, not tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. So, but so a lot of what I do now is incorporates the education. I mean, today, I think on every call that I was on with clients today, we brought up education and talked about education, teaching, training. You guys do, sales training.
Right.
And, it's that knowledge transfer. And some of the things you mentioned, nobody cares about college. And so as educators, we get really upset because we went to college to learn how to transfer knowledge. And then you talk to anybody and they're like, oh, I'm going to go teach. I'm like, did you go to school to know how to do that? Well, no, I'm just going to do it. And so we get we're like, well, we learned how to do it.
Well, I learned how to teach by failing a lot at teaching. Right?
Yeah,
and then you learn eventually
it's one way to do it.
the right way to teach. Like, oh, that doesn't work. Oh, this does work. And we're still learning.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to one of your podcasts. You're going to get your PhD again, right? Because your mom wants you to go get it.
Yeah, of course, clearly.
Gathering, so.
That's a good... If it's not a return on time, effort, investment, or anything like that, we're not doing it.
Yep.
And a PhD offers no return whatsoever.
Yeah, I could see that. I have no desire to go back to school. I spent enough time there. But that's what it's college for. That's what I had passion for it. I love doing it. I love the job. What I ran into for me was it was the same thing over and over again. Every year was just start back over, teach the exact same thing, go through the same motions again.
Same exact curriculum.
Yeah, same exact thing. And so it really didn't come down to the money as much. And as I've gotten older even, I realized that it was more just the challenge. So I always felt like I kind of had mastered it and it was just there. It was the same thing. And I was like, I want something different, which oddly enough, we're going to talk about PI is not part of my profile.
I was going to say with the Guardian,
I'm situational, but it was just like the same thing over and over again. And so I was just looking, I think in some ways I had almost too much time on my hands is probably what it was. And I needed more than that.
Yeah.
And so...
so you found something else.
Yeah. So I was in college, I worked at Papa John's delivering pizza I paid for all of college through it, walked out with no debt delivering pizza.
You're a pizza delivery guy.
A pizza delivery guy for all through college, who make significantly more money than you think they make. And I was really good at it. And again, paid for all of college, debt free, delivering pizza.
How does one get good at delivering
It's logistics.
Pizzas? Yeah.
It's knowing, not getting lost, oddly enough, out there just not goofing around. And it's also sales. I show up to the door and it's, can I sell myself in 30 seconds for you to give me more of a tip? Because that's all the action is. Like at a restaurant, you get a little more interaction. In pizza, I get about 30 seconds to get you to give me a couple extra dollars.
To maximize the tips.
Yeah, to maximize the tips out of it. And so it does become sales at the door, but only in 30 seconds. I'm good for about 30 seconds, and that's about it. So from there.
And then at what point did you decide to do something different?
So I'd been teaching for 6 years, and I was in administration at that point too. And so I got a call from the franchisee that I had worked for, who's a very good friend of mine, who oddly enough works for me now. And he had sold out and moved on to other things. And he called and said, "Hey, this store in my hometown," he's like, they're gonna close it down. If you wanted to get into your own business, you probably could pick it up pretty cheap. Now, in the franchise world, franchisees already have money. So when you see a franchise as a franchise owner, they already, national franchises only sell to people who have certain amounts of net worth, who are proven operators. That's why you hardly ever see a franchise close, because there's already money behind them.
Right.
So I wouldn't have qualified. My dad was a truck driver for UPS. I was a school teacher making $35,000 a year. I had no assets. I owned my own home, but it was a small house. And but they were going to close the store down. And not to get into too much detail, but it was like the perfect storm of they just didn't want to close any more stores down in the Chicago market, where the owner told them either approve the sale, and he sold it to me on contract. So I started with real estate investors, not creative financing. I'm like, oh, I did that a bunch of times, creative financing. So owner financing. And he sold it to me on contract, and they approved the sale because they didn't want the store to close. I've never heard of them doing it before or since.
Yeah.
And so that's how I kind of got into it. I remember because they wanted me to go to 2 weeks of training, 6 weeks of training, and I couldn't afford to go to the 6 weeks of training. So I had to talk them into letting me walk right into the store and just take it over. I walked in day one. I didn't know how to answer I didn't know how to work the computer system because it had been so many years they had changed it. And it'd been 5 years. And so I didn't know I had to have one of the drivers teach me how to take it, process an order in the system and stuff like that on day one. And so jumped into that, worked open to close every day, except for Sunday mornings. I took off for church. My daughter was 2, and we worked the entire day shift. My youngest brother was 12. He was my weekend pizza maker to help me on the rushes on Friday, Saturday nights. And the first year in business, it was the fastest growing store in the country. And so it just took off right out of the gate. My second year, I had the opportunity to buy another one, owner financed as well. Actually, the store I had worked at in college. And once you're into the franchise, then you can kind of buy whatever you want.
Right.
And so bought that store. It was the fastest growing store in the country that year. Walked into year 3, had investors at that point who saw my success and wanted to invest money. So we were building a brand new store. In the middle of that, another owner wanted to sell. Same thing, owner financed it. That store was the fastest growing store in the country that year. Then I opened a store. It was the largest opening they'd ever had in Chicago on that store. And then it just kind of kept going from there. Built a 5th one. Bought one up in Ann Arbor, University of Michigan. Sorry for all you Ohio State fans. And then built 2 more up in Michigan. So I ended up with 8 of them in about 6 years.
Not bad for someone that had no training, couldn't afford the training.
No, couldn't afford the training, didn't have any money. That growth, they just had to walk into it and kind of, cobble it all together from there. And so yeah, I ended up with, I have a copy of my first payroll. There's five names on it. And then I have the copy of my last payroll, which has over 200 names on it. It's pages long that I have.
So what's interesting, so you had to finance it, you had to owner finance it, you had to get it approved. I remember I read one of Robert Allen's books, right?
Okay.
Multiple streams of income. One was getting an MLM, you learn sales skills, networking skills, so on. The other one was buy franchises. And so when I was still working at Intel, I was looking at buying franchises. And you look around, and it's it seems like everyone's trying to sell a house cleaning business. But the ones that were interesting to me, I was looking at as a consumer, which ones would I go buy? And I was looking at Jamba Juice. Okay, Jamba Juice, I can franchise a Jamba Juice. And you look at how much it costs to get involved in one of those. It was $150,000 to get started.
Right.
And on top of that, you had to have had a track record of 70 successful stores. It's
wow.
Who the heck has this? Yeah. Has 70 stores and has 150,000 lying around. I guess, some of these other
Yeah.
franchisees, but it's a fascinating world. To break in the franchise, you have to have a lot of things going on, or
It was just an anomaly and of a perfect storm that was happening during that period of time in the Chicago market with stuff. It's a story for another time because it's interesting. It crosses like political stuff even of what was going on back then. But
so what would you attribute? Because you're not even part of the Papa John network. What would you attribute to having multiple fastest growing stores, best opening, with no, from the outside looking in, no reason to expect that?
Well, yeah, I know money, because that's the thing you look at is to say, okay, well, how are you going to increase revenue? Well, you got to spend money to make money, so you got to put money into marketing, especially in that kind of an industry.
Yeah.
You know, what are you going to do? You won't find restaurants that have sales departments. They don't exist. You know, and there's no pipeline in the restaurant industry either. Your pipeline is it doesn't exist. You
They have the car you or they don't.
No, right?
Yeah.
You know what's going to come in that morning, and so when it happened, they called me, the marketing department calling Papa John's, and they're like, "What are you doing?" Like, you know, they're thinking, you know, I'm coming from the outside. I must have brought something in. There's something new I'm doing. You know, whatever I did, and I said, I answered the phone. And they were like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just answered the phone." And
Because you guys already took care of the marketing.
yeah,
I just had to answer the phone.
yeah, I didn't spend any extra marketing dollars for the first 3 years I was in business. All 3 stores that were fastest growing got no marketing dollars spent on them. And I said I just answered the phone when it rang. I was nice to customers, and I made a good pizza like that. And every store I'd go into that I bought, it was funny because I'd buy existing stores and I'd go in, and the GM that was there, who usually I fired on the first day, but that's another story. I'd walk in the door and they'd say, "Yeah, I have all these ideas, you know, of things I wanted to try that we can try and do to grow sales," and the previous owner wouldn't listen to me. And I would say, "Yeah, we're not going to do that either." And he'd say, "Well, what are we going to do?" I'm like, "You're going to answer the phone?" And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "More than likely, you're not answering the phone." And in the consulting, that principle, when I walk into businesses, is like I start from that. Like, you know, what's your phone? Like, what is like the basic thing you should be doing?
Yeah.
And they'll go to masterminds and they'll hear all these fancy things going on. And I'm like, but are you executing the basics
Right.
of that? It's not so much nowadays, but back then in that industry, the phone was the lifeline. Everybody, you call in, you order a pizza. You know, very few people just walk in and order a pizza. And that was the lifeline, and they would just stop answering the phone. That's another thing. But hourly employees are trying to be as efficient as possible, and efficiency is not answering the phone because I'm mopping the floor trying to get out of the store. Well, you want me to get out at night on time, don't you?
Yeah.
So I shouldn't take orders.
So this is like kind of like call reluctance. I don't want to pick up the phone and call out, but at the same time, I don't want to even answer the phone, because if I have to answer the phone, I have to do more work.
Exactly. Well, I mean, and to go over to any kind of sales organization, you know, I don't wholesalers. I don't call them wholesalers. I call them direct to seller, because that's really what they're doing. You're direct to seller marketing and sales. And so usually when I go to work with a client, first thing we look at is lead management, like right out of the gate. How fast are we responding to web leads? You know, and inevitably, if the performance is bad, and you can talk to some of the service providers, it's, you know, 24 hours, 2 hours. You know, it's rarely
Painful.
ever is it 2 minutes. Then you go to the elite operators, and it's 2 minutes. You know, and there's all kinds of studies about an airline, when the airlines did one about how much more people will pay if they are on hold, like for less than 2 minutes. And so it goes to the basic side of things. When you go to
me personally, I know if I know I'm gonna get 1-800 answer, or it's gonna be like was an IVR, right? It's the, you know, like press 1 for this, press 2 for that. Like for me, like I'm already dying on the inside.
Oh, I just push 0. I just keep pushing 0 till I get to a person. Like I don't even listen to the stuff.
So I was in tech support with a company the other day, Calendly. They don't have a phone, right? So I think I dropped the F word inside the AI bot. So I was trying to see, like, how many F words will it take
That's great.
for this to get escalated to an actual person who answered the phone. I didn't hit 100, but
Maybe that was the number.
Maybe that was the number, right? We'll never know. But about 80-ish was not the number.
That's great.
Right? But like, you'll keep hitting 0 because you're aggravated by this experience. I mean, right now we got all these AI bots and everything else. Like, you know, like there's not a human touch.
Yep.
And it makes a big difference.
Well, it's like one of the things that we changed right out of the gate was this, and it aggravates me with restaurants, is that we took orders until the minute we closed. Like we close at midnight, we take orders till midnight. We don't close at midnight, we stop taking orders at midnight. Like things like that. That was just, but it was basic stuff. Like you would say, of course you would answer the phone. But I would tell them, I said, just so you know, if it's 11:59 and the phone rings and you don't answer it, just go ahead and put your key on the counter and leave because I'm on my way there to fire you. Because I had zero tolerance with it because that was my lifeline. And it's interesting too when I work with direct to seller companies. I mean, a phone call to me was worth $10, $20.
Right.
Something like that. What did it cost me to make that phone ring? We do marketing a little different. In real estate especially, they're looking for a needle in a haystack. It's very targeted marketing. In the restaurant industry, it's who's my avatar? Anybody who's hungry. It's everybody.
Right.
So we're doing mass amounts of marketing. And so the marketing is cheap when you do that. Cents. I think it cost me like $50 per 1,000 or something like that to send that stuff out.
Wow.
And so to make the phone ring, it still cost me money, but not the kind of money where, a good PPC lead can cost you $250.
Right.
I've heard TV leads as much as $600 or $700. Guys will put money on it. And I'll go in and you're talking to lead management, the incoming call, and we're going to talk about people today, and the person answering the call, and we have spent $250 to $700 to make that phone ring, and we're just kind of like, whatever. We've spent essentially thousands of dollars to go on an appointment, and it's like, maybe we'll go on it, maybe we won't. Can we come up with a reason to not go on the appointment? I always talk to people like, are we qualifying leads or are we disqualifying leads? Because the big difference between those two.
Yeah.
And when I get the owners and the leaders to understand how much they have spent to make that phone, sometimes you'll see the anger come up in the owner when he realizes it. Yeah. I have spent this much and we're not answering the phone. We're not responding back to people in 2 minutes, and it cost me how much to make that PPC lead come in? Like that. If you talk to like Audantic and Chris Richter, and he did a big study on how many leads came in that are in people's systems that sold for dollar amounts we would have sold, we would have bought it for, and
we went through that audit.
We marked it as dead.
We went through that audit. It was very, very painful.
Yes.
It caused us to be more hyper aggressive in the follow up. And I could say, as a solo operator, when I was just doing my own campaigns, right, there was only one number that if it rang, I could stand up from the dinner table. Like I can be talking to my wife, we can have a nice dinner. If this phone rang, I'm taking the call.
Yeah.
And we were on the same page because she knows how much it costs for the phone to ring.
Yeah.
Right. And this is back when getting the phone to ring was not a couple $100. It was like under $100.
Yeah.
But the potential on that was 10, 15 or more, $1,000.
Yep.
Right. So she was totally on board. A regular lead comes in, back in the realtor days, buyer leads, seller leads. She's like, that can wait. But if the We Buy Houses campaign phone number rings, because it was a special phone number, if that phone rings, I have full authority, doesn't matter where I'm at, to stand up and take the call.
Yep. So I was in college, and Papa John's standard is to answer the phone within 3 rings. Franchisee I worked for, he'll probably listen to this because he works for me, it was 2. And I remember he called one day, and the phone would ring on his end, then ring at the store, ring on his end, ring at the store, ring on his end, 3rd ring, I would answer. Twice on my end, 3 on his. Oh, he would light me up. It rang 3 times. What were you doing? You better answer that phone in 2 rings. Oh, he would just, and I'm like, I did. One day, finally, I think I recorded it to show him what it was doing. He was in the store one day, and I showed him to show him. But then I come over and I work with business owners and sales departments in particular, and leads come in, and we have this very casual, nonchalant, whatever. And I'm looking at him like, I would lose my mind and fire people over not answering I had a $10 pizza call, and you guys, this is a $35,000 wholesale flip, whatever, and your people are just like, we'll get back to them. We get back to them, and you guys aren't losing your mind right now. Like it would just, I'm used to a revenue happening in minutes, and teams will have no revenue for several weeks in a row, and I'm like, I would be losing my mind right now.
So, but let's go from here to. At which point did you start working with real estate organizations?
Sure.
Most business owners waste their time and money on solutions that never fix the root problems. They'll address all the symptoms due to slow revenue, and because they're only fixing the consequences, the real problem stays hidden and the cycle of wasting time and money continues. It's like having a lingering headache that won't go away despite trying every over-the-counter medicine. When in reality, you should have just gone to the doctor and had them figure out exactly what was causing the headache. And that's what's so difficult about business. You can see and feel the symptoms and yet struggle to find it. Now imagine you can find a prescription that doesn't just mask the symptoms, but actually addresses the root cause. Where would your business be if you addressed that right now? That's what our sales event is about. Your marketing doesn't suck, your leads aren't bad, and your operations aren't terrible. It's that you haven't addressed what actually makes you money in wholesale, which is the conversations you have with homeowners. It's critical that you build trust with sellers, demonstrate that you fully understand their situation, know exactly what's keeping them up at night, and paint the ideal outcome that leads them to a better future by working with you. That's what it takes to get signed contracts and keep your business going. Simply put, at our event, you'll walk away with the framework, phrases, questions, documents, and process to close more sales and buy more houses. Join the hundreds of others who have come to our live event and dramatically grown their business. Our event is happening soon and is available for you to join only if you're willing to take the pill. Did you start working with real estate organizations?
Sure. So I had the stores for 10 years. Sold all of them, kind of in a couple different sets. So exited, successfully out of that industry. There I was 38. It just kind of happened. I wasn't like looking to sell. They just kind of happened.
Like someone just came in and just gave you like a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah,
That's nice.
I had the Ann Arbor stores in Michigan, which were University U of M, and another franchisee called me up from Florida, and he wanted them. His daughter-in-law was from there. His son was moving back up there, and he's like, just tell me how much. Corporate thought I was selling him all 8 of my stores, and I'm selling him 3 because I found out he had a bunch of money and he didn't really care. And so I had just signed the contract for the big house, the stadium, to sell in the stadium that fall. And so I was like, he called me, I'm like, and I think with business owners too, and this is, we're diverting a little bit, but it's, I get a lot of feedback from people over like the masterminds, when they go to masterminds, that they start to realize that we come from a place of this problem can be solved, not like, let me just go do something else. And so when you attack a problem with, okay, there's a solution somewhere in here. And so we couldn't figure out how to market to the college students. So I ended up getting a hold of the directory of all the students. 60,000 names and email addresses were in there. And this is back 2008, 17. We manually entered all of them into MailChimp. I hired somebody and manually entered them all. It was the only way to get them in because they wouldn't give me a digital copy, only a hard copy. And so then we started to be able to directly email the students. And so we finally had cracked that code because Ann Arbor is the home of Domino's. I could see Domino's corporate office from my store.
Okay.
Yeah. And they were ruthless too. They were trying to put me out of business. There's more stories there, but I have a lot of stories. But so he came along, offered me, I sold. A year later, I sold, just threw it out there. They were sold in 2 days. The rest of my stores were. Again, I had one of my stores, the highest sales per capita in the country for Papa John's, and really good stores, well ran, really good team. And people often ask me, like, how do you evaluate a business? And it starts with, like, how good is your team?
Right.
Because when I sold, the store still had to open the next day, and who was going to open them?
Were you planning on retiring?
I kind of came out of nowhere when I sold them, so I didn't really, like, have a plan. Oddly enough, it was just kind of just happened up real quick. And so Gary Harper, my business partner, and I have been friends since we were teenagers.
Okay.
Of course, Susan.
Troublemakers.
Yeah, well, he's the troublemaker. I'm keeping my job is to keep him out of jail.
There you go.
So Susan's my cousin.
Okay.
And so I've known Gary since before he dated Susan, but Susan's my cousin. And so, which we can talk about that in PI because we hire a lot of family, and people always ask us that, like, yo, we hire a lot of family, and we'll talk about that in the hiring process. But because all family still goes through the hiring process for us, and either they match or they don't match.
Yeah.
So people are like, well, you hire family. I'm like, yeah, but let me show you the resume of each one of the family members and their PI profile, along with what the target is and you'll see that each one of us
Right.
is like a 10 out of 10 match with experience for the position. We just not long ago turned down a family member who needed a job because they didn't fit the position we were hiring for.
Right.
So I don't really care who they are, but if they don't fit the role, I'm not offering them a job. And so, but I'm also not going to disqualify them. Some people do, and that's fine, but I'm going to disqualify them over it. But so I sold out. So Gary called me. Oddly enough, I had given Gary the idea of going into business consulting. I had just hired a business coach a few years before, and he came over to meet with me, and he was like, man, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do, and I'm doing real estate. And I said, well, I just hired a business coach. Why don't you get business coaching? And then a couple years later, I'm talking to him. He had started Sharper and about the year before that. So Gary called me and was like, hey, what are you going to do now? I'm like, man, I have no idea. I know I'm going to Florida I sold my stores, got in the car and drove to Florida. And my wife is like, when are we coming back? And I'm like, I don't know. Just whenever I finally feel like it. And then one day I just got up, like, all right, let's go back home.
Yeah.
And so I said, I don't know. I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do yet. Take a break for a while, enjoy the kids. My kids are still young. And he goes, well, I just started Sharper. Why don't you come help me at Sharper? And I said, all right, 3 things. Number 1, I don't do sales. Number 2, from
Allegedly.
home. Yeah, from home, I don't do sales part-time. Well, part-time for Gary is half a day. Half a day is 12 hours.
Right.
I work from home, but I travel every week now.
Yeah.
I'm somewhere. In the last month, I've been all over.
Tempe is your home for the next couple of days.
Oh yeah. And I've been all over the world in the last month. I've started picking up international clients.
You're doing Colombia, right?
Colombia, Cairo, Warsaw. I'm going to Warsaw at the end of July. I just got back.
Who's in Warsaw?
A new client in Warsaw.
Okay.
I was just in Cairo a few weeks ago. Call center in Cairo. Well, call center does VAs in general, but I went on site for that one, and which has been really cool. I got to take my dad and my son on that trip with me, so it was
pretty cool.
It was a very, 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 very good trip, and anyway, so I travel every week. Part time is 12 hours for Gary, and then I get my first business card, and it says sales manager on it. In fact, if you go to LinkedIn, and I leave it up for this reason too, LinkedIn says that I'm Sharper sales manager is what it says. And the business card came in. I called Gary. I said, "What is this?" And it was me, him, Susan, and Susan's sister. It's part time. That's all it was at the time. And I said, "What is this?" He goes, "Well, you're just going to manage the sales department," which was him. I'm like, "I'm going to manage you." Right, whatever. So, and it was funny too, because I talked about before the show, a little bit of like ego check. I was coming off of, I had all kinds of sales awards, sales and pizza, those, well, we can talk about that, but it was a little bit different. I guess it is sales, but I had sales awards. I was youngest franchisee in Chicago the entire time I was there. All kinds of stuff. People knew who I was. I had John Schnatter, Papa John, had flown to us and taken us out to lunch. I knew he knew who I was, like things like that. And so then I go into the real estate space. I don't know anybody. And people call me like, "Oh, are you Gary's personal assistant?" I'm like, "No, I am not Gary's personal assistant. Like, I'm retired here." And so that kind of kicked off with Sharper early on. And it was primarily just helping. Gary was being consults all day. And
when was this exactly?
2018.
2018.
July 30th.
So 2018, you start working with Sharper as quote unquote the sales manager.
Yeah, quote unquote the sales manager. And so Gary and I were getting sales calls together, but my job was, Gary, my job was to make sure I got all the notes, because he'd get off the call and he'd call me like, "I just sold the client." "Okay, you have their name?" "Yeah, here's their name." "What's the name of the company?" "I don't know." "Their phone number?" Message him on Facebook. Like, he wouldn't have anything at all. I'm like, no more phone calls without me on the call with you.
Yeah.
So he and I, would meet together. I would kind of do lead management. We'd jump on a call together, and he would close it from there, and then just kind of hold down the fort with that. And so it just kind of grew from there, and wasn't real sure where I would fit with him. I just came on thinking, I'll be with him for a year and kind of just help him and figure out what I want to do from here. And it just kind of kept snowballing. It was interesting because I was just going back through some financials, and the quarter that I came on with Sharper, and this is talking about elite companies like bringing on people, we did more in third quarter than he had did in the first 2 quarters combined. And then it just kept doubling like really, really fast. And just bringing on, except pat myself on the back, I guess that I was the right person, but bringing on the right people. And so it just kind of picked up from there. But one of the things is kind of in the coaching world is having a specialty. What do you specialize in?
Right.
And out of the gate, I did not specialize in real estate. I owned my house. That was about it.
Yeah.
I remember going to masterminds and being like, I don't know what's going on. So really, and part of what you talk about in the intro of your show is the amount of education that you can get in the era that we live in off of podcasts, YouTube. I mean, just go down
There's no
the
shortage
list.
of information.
Oh no! And joining masterminds and groups like that, hiring the right coaches. I mean, you can get the education, just if you're willing to put the time in,
Right.
to it. And so, attending those, listening to those things, I got up to speed pretty quick. Talking real estate all day with guys, not being afraid to ask questions. I think that's often a lot of times people don't want to ask questions. So there's people saying, "I don't know what that means. Can you explain it to me?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, this is what it means."
So what are you responsible? Are you still the sales manager?
I am not the sales manager. Now, I do manage the sales manager, but I am not the sales manager of it anymore. Oddly enough, I am the number one salesperson in Predictive Index's history.
Yeah.
I have sold more subscriptions in a single year than anybody ever has in 70 years. And I'm not a salesperson.
You're my guy on the
Yes, I'm your guy on it.
on the PI.
But when we get into PI, we can kind of talk about what that is.
So if someone wants to buy
really
PI,
important.
talk to us.
Just call me. I'll take care of it. I'll get you the
Gotcha.
best deal you can get.
So then, what are you doing for Sharper? Because like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, like you flew into town and you're doing my quarterly tomorrow. So last quarter it was Brandon. The quarter before that it was Amanda Dean. Well, 2 quarters before that was Amanda Dean.
Yeah.
And Amanda's basically, I'm tired of you. Like, bring someone else out here. Right. Like she already has to deal with me twice a month on this TSO calls.
Does she? Nice.
Right.
So I what I'm responsible now is I just took back over the COO position in Sharper. So we run an ecosystem model with business unit leaders that run each of our businesses and the day-to-day operations. And then we have finance, sales, and marketing are all shared resources for each of those business unit leaders. So kind of think about them like like they're the third party. They could contract out their finance to that company. So what it allows is it allows our executive team, which is me, Brandon, Gary, and Susan, to kind of control all of that together by us. All the finance goes to the finance department. So if I need finance numbers for any one of my companies, I go to the finance department. I'm not calling all the different businesses to find out what's going on. Same thing with marketing. Brandon makes sure that it's a consistent message across all the platforms that are not, crossing over each other, things like that. So I manage all what we call business unit leaders. So they all respond directly to me, which, again, as we're talking about people today, is really important. Those are the right people because I don't have a lot of time to interact with them. They get about an hour a week is what they get from me. And so they've got to be right on their game. So I manage all of them as the COO. I am officially the CFO as well, but I have a finance department that runs all the finance there, but I make all the decisions for that department. And then kind of going down a level, I manage the CSO. So Amanda works for me in my department. Don't tell Amanda that I said that she works for me, but like all the CSOs.
We'll send her this clip specifically.
What'd you say?
We'll send her this clip specifically.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But so all the CSOs work for me, so I manage that department as well. So all the coaches, I interact with all of them, and then and that's kind of what I. And then I do coaching.
So if I was one of your business unit leaders, what would I get in my hour a week with Austin?
We're going to jump straight into identifying, discussing, and solving problems. Like we cut right into it, like really fast. They know they got about 60 minutes, so they have to come prepared with what they need out of me. And then what I'm listening for is, helping them solve problems, number one. Anything that they can't solve. So I do a lot of coaching every week as well. I'm out on the road 2 days a week, middle of the week. And then I also do CSO calls like Amanda does too.
Right.
So Mondays and Fridays are my CSO calls. Tuesdays my internal meetings. Wednesday and Thursday I'm out with clients.
Gotcha.
It's usually my typical schedule.
And then
so
in your coaching role,
in
your capacity, what are you doing on site visits?
Quarterlies, our RISE curriculum implementation. All those things there, like the next, with you, it's quarterly meetings, which are resetting the goals, any kind of additional training, big problem solving, and then we do a 2-day implementation of our curriculum in the RISE business framework. So I do that as well. So like the rest of this week, I actually have another implementation to roll out as well.
Gotcha.
So
how does someone come about, raise their hand and say, I want to get implementation training?
They just reach out to Sharper. we run an audit on their business first, kind of see where they're at, what type of product is the best fit for them. We are somewhat picky with clients that we bring on. We need them to be at certain stages of the business. To say that, I've worked with clients who don't have any employees yet, and then we work with companies that have hundreds of employees.
Yeah.
But it's evaluating kind of where they're at and what they need to kind of customize that a little bit, along with what coach is going to be the best fit for them. I work, I don't know, we've got clients in all kinds of different industries, from restaurants to real estate to education to beauty supplies to call centers. I mean, I could go, it goes on and on and on of the client list that we have.
Yeah. Gary mentioned to me there was a giant smoothie company, you guys. Yeah, recently onboarded. It's pretty cool to see like this reach, because you guys started in just like kind of like this real estate niche.
Yeah.
And now you kind of like you're expanding your reach to who you work with.
Yeah.
So we talked about the difference between average operators and elite businesses. What is that biggest difference?
People.
Okay.
We kind of talked about it a little bit before we got started, and I'm a firm believer in it. My best example is the 2 Taco Bells by my house. They're both about the same distance from my house. Actually, the one's a little bit further. They get the exact same product, the exact same processes, the exact same equipment. Everything's exactly the same, but I would go to one Taco Bell that's further away than I'll go to the other one. Why? Because of the people who work there.
Right.
It's just they take care of customers better. I know enough about the industry to know when they're stealing, and the one is constantly stealing, from it.
How can you tell?
After 8:00 at night, all of a sudden they don't take credit cards anymore, cash only, and then when you ask them for a receipt, they can't give you one.
That happens?
Oh yeah, but as soon as they say, nowadays in restaurants, the credit card machine is never down. If the internet goes down, there's an automatic cellular backup for that system, so it never does go down. So as soon as they say our credit card machine's not working anymore, that's a red flag. Because as soon as the cash comes in, they're just stick it in their pocket, hand you the taco, and that's that. Inventory control in a restaurant is pretty.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard in fast food that theft is the greatest challenge, and it's not necessarily. I didn't know about the pocketing cash. It was like, hey, Austin, come in, and I'll just give you a sandwich for free.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of oh, you're my friend from high school, from college. Just come on in, we'll hang out.
Oh, and the other thing too is that the employees themselves don't view certain things. For example, a 20 ounce of Coke. I noticed your vending machine out front, so it got my attention. I chuckled. Yeah. I've got cases of Coke in there. Well, it's Pepsi now, I guess, Papa John's, but a Pepsi out there, and they're thirsty. They're working hard. It's hot in the store. They think, oh, I'll just grab one. It's not that big of a deal. They grab one. Well, I had 200 employees. 200. If everybody grabs one, just start doing the math.
Right.
It adds up fast. At $1.25 a 20 ounce, it cost me to buy those. I can blow through, $300 worth of Pepsi every day.
What is your in Papa John's? What was your profit margins?
In a good store, about 15%. I had when they were low volume, it was 5 if you could crack it. So it really is about scale. It's about producing, and that's the thing. I work a lot with. It's kind of funny. I have a degree in math, and so I work a lot with people and finance. Is where I spend most of my time with clients. Usually, if that's struggling with one of those two, that's usually where I come in, is to go through finance. I'm not an accountant, but I do a lot with finance, and I forgot what we were talking about, where I was going with it.
We're talking about profit margins.
Yeah, thank you, profit margins. So the faster the cash conversion cycle, usually the lower the profit margin. The longer the cash conversion cycle, the higher the profit margin.
Interesting.
I wouldn't say that that's a law that's true all the time, but it usually is a trend.
Yeah.
Well, I think about wholesaling compared to flipping. Wholesaling, faster, but a lower amount of money. Or do I want to flip it,
maximize it,
double my money, and go longer? Like that. It's that play. So people are like, why would you go into a restaurant industry at a 15% profit margin? Because my cash conversion cycle is minutes long. I'm making cash instantly.
Gotcha.
Whereas in real estate, I'll come into clients often, and they'll hire us and they'll say, so we're almost out of money. Can you come in and try to help us figure this out? And I'm like, okay, well, what's in your pipeline? Well, there's nothing in the pipeline. Okay, so if we sign a contract today, we're what, 30 days at best on a wholesale from seeing revenue?
30 to 90 days.
Oh yeah, or whatever. Innovation 110, flipped longer than that. How much money do we have on hand? Well, maybe 2 weeks. Okay, so what do you think we're going to do here? You're not going to see revenue for 30 days, and you only have 2 weeks of money. So paying attention to that cash conversion cycle, pipeline. A lot of people refer to that as pipeline, but even more than that, knowing how fast your pipeline is going to convert in business is. Salespeople don't like to discuss that.
Right.
So they don't think about that. They think, well, if I just sell more, I'll be okay. And there's so many more pieces.
The reason I'm asking that is like wholesaling is already as tough as it is. And like a good operator, like an excellent operator is 30 to 40%, right? Average operator is 15 to 20%. Is that what you see typically?
Yeah, I don't see much above 45%.
Right.
And
45, you got to be really lean or really small. It's one of those things.
Occasionally, you'll hear somebody that'll be above that. There's always a catch. Always something going on with it as to why. And if you dig deeper, you usually figure out why.
Yeah.
But yeah,
the ones I've seen that have had crazy is that they're both the visionary and the integrator. Yeah. Right. They can wear both hats well. Right. But that's not it's not something you can bet on. But the reason I'm asking this is that you look at restaurants with like their 4% profit margins, and you look at this Pepsi theft. Like that gets you from 4% to losing money.
Oh yeah, real fast.
Yep. So there's just not a lot of like room for error. Whereas like you're talking about like the guys that are the phone's ringing is like they're not losing their minds, but it's like but I can make that up
right
on the next one, right? Like there's a lot of margin for error. Yes. Although that margin for error is getting tighter and tighter these days.
Well, and you're looking at how many $10 pizzas do I have to sell to get to a $20,000 wholesale fee compared? Like, right? You can just say, well, and that often is to the mindset with them and their finances. Like, oh, well, if I just sell one extra deal, it's like, okay, but can you actually get one more deal and get it closed in the period of time that we got to have it closed in?
Right.
So you're right. It does create a little bit of loose lackness, not as much discipline. Like I had a full-time person that did nothing but audit everything every day. And it's funny because I hired her into Sharper. And I remember Gary spent some money on a credit card, which was fine. But she called him the next morning and she's like, what'd you spend on? He's like, what? And he calls me. He's like, she just called me and like, I just spent something last night and she called me this morning. I said, and she had worked for me in the stores. And I said, yeah, that's what she does. That's what she's used to doing because she audited everything. And Gary's like, I like this. Like he liked the fact that there was somebody watching the money like that tightly. Because you have to.
I got a message this morning from my team, and they're like, "Did you have Fuzzy's Taco last week?" I was like, "I did." Right.
You guys have got like two of my favorite restaurants in the country, by the way, in Phoenix. Yeah. They can cut this out.
Which
Angie's Lobster.
It's amazing.
I had it last night. We're gonna have it again tonight.
They're changing the menu though.
I know. I'm going to try something different tonight. I'm going to try one of their grilled things.
I'm not sure I like their business direction with that.
No, it's slowing them down already. Yeah. I analyze that stuff when I go in.
Yeah, like I'm looking at it like, okay, so you sold one thing and you crushed it.
Yep.
And now you've added like 8 other things.
Yep.
And I'm concerned that you're changing your business model.
Yep. And they're fresh grilling it, so they're adding time to it as well. I'll see how it goes because I'm about ready to call them and be like, hey, can I license this up in like Indiana? Because the model they had with the lobster and everything like that.
Yeah, Angie's Lobster by itself, fantastic. This new thing, I'm a little less excited about this direction because I've been in business long enough that the more complexity you add, the more the worse it is. All right, what was the second one?
Jalapeno Bucks.
Have not been that one. Oh, I think that's the one that Gary.
And I'm not going to, because I told him about it. Yeah. And I'm not going to get to it. I'm not going to get to it on this trip. It's kind of far. Yeah. It's kind of far out, and I'm not going to, just my timeline, I'm not going to make it. But
so
anyway, sorry.
So let's go back to, no, we're not cutting it out. There's no censoring here. So we've only cut 2 episodes. We only edited 2 episodes this whole time. Okay. We got 300 episodes.
All right, wow.
One, because the guy went really long on a story.
Yeah.
Another one, the guy dropped a derogatory term for a group of people. I was like, did this guy just say this in a podcast?
I guess he just thought you were going to edit it, huh?
Yeah. So like as soon as it was over, I talked to the producer. I was like, hey, trim this part out.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. So
profit margins. We're talking
no,
about.
we're talking about so the difference between excellent, between average and elite, right?
Yeah,
Is
people.
So I see this happen all the time, and like it's such like an obvious thing to me today, but it's not an obvious thing to me when I was hiring. So screening on profiles.
Yep.
What is the difference on the excellent and the average people, businesses?
The excellent people are disciplined enough to wait for the right person to come along, not just so. Okay, most of us in hire, and I've hired over 7,000 people.
Wow.
Okay, high turnover business. We were hiring always. I fired and hired every week for years. It just was part of the process.
Yeah.
And
So you only got to keep 200 after how many you?
oh yeah, that's why it was constant
fired.
turnover. It was just constant. You know,
Yeah.
with it, it was always firing.
Yeah.
Theft every week. Dealt with theft every week. It's always. It wasn't. Is somebody stealing from me? It's who is stealing from me. Let's find them this week.
Man.
Yeah, it was always part.
So you might even be more jaded than I am.
Oh, I very, very much am. And so I did a lot of hiring. And when you hire, most of us hire, we sit down and interview, and we're hiring on our gut and how we feel about it. We just, people tell me, well, I'm a good judge of character. And I'm like, no, you're not. Like, none of us really are. And because, yeah, there's just things you don't know about them. You're not going to get an interview. Salespeople are going to interview great. So you'll hire a salesperson to just about do anything because they will sell themselves on the job.
Right.
But if you hired a salesperson to be your bookkeeper, you got a big problem. But if you interview a bookkeeper and you interview a salesperson, the salesperson is going to interview way better than the bookkeeper is. And my team has even done it. A couple years ago, they went to hire somebody. They interviewed these 3 people, and they're like, we really like this guy. And I looked at his profile, and I'm like, no, you're not hiring him. It was an operations role. And they're like, well, he interviewed really, really well. I'm like, of course he interviewed well. He's a maverick. I'm like,
Oh my God.
this is the girl you want. And they're like, well, her interview was just kind of, I said, go interview her a second time. She doesn't connect quickly with people. So interview her a second time. They came back and they're like, oh yeah, she was much better the second time. I'm like, I told you. And phenomenal employee. But their gut reaction, and they knew better, was to go with this one here.
Right.
What behavioral assessments do, and I think it's a misnomer, is that they don't tell me that somebody can or can't do something. What they tell me is what motivates somebody. So what I'm looking at is, do they like doing it, to put like on the bottom shelf? So what we do is, a behavioral assessment comes in, and actually it happened today. I got a text message today from a client with a profile that is not the right profile. And they're like, well, this person they interviewed really, really well, and blah, blah, they have experience and all this kind of stuff. What do you think? And I just text them back, no. Because what this person did was they told you what they like doing and what, in turn, they don't like doing. And what you said was, I don't really care. I'm going to have you do it anyway. Even though they said they don't like, for example, with me, if you look at my reference profile or my behavioral assessment, it'll tell you that I'm not motivated by social interaction. Well, what do you do in sales? You interact with people.
Yeah.
So I just told you, yeah, Steve, talking to people doesn't really motivate me. And you're going to say, well, that's okay, Austin. We're going to have you talk to people all day anyway. You'll be fine. It'll be great because you're a good guy. It's been wonderful.
You'll figure it out.
Yeah, you'll figure it out, from there. And that's what we do. And that's to use it at a real high level. So starting off with, it doesn't mean you can't do something. That's what you can do whatever you want to do. And if I motivate you enough by something else, you will do it for a long period of time.
Right.
My dad's a great example. He worked at UPS, drove a semi for 35 years from Chicago to Indianapolis and back every day. He's a very social, outgoing person. So why would he lock himself in a truck for 12 hours a day and not talk to anybody, for 35 years? Well, I had a handicapped brother. The insurance paid out $4 million on the insurance. My dad had to have the job. So he put up with it for 35 years because they paid out $4 million on my brother, and he couldn't afford to lose the job under that.
Right.
My brother passed away. My dad retired 2 years later. The day he was eligible for retirement, he was gone because he no longer had to have the job. But to motivate him to do it was something entirely different.
And it's like, I've shared, people don't believe me, when I first started as a realtor. My paperwork was spotless.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I didn't miss initials or signatures or this or that. Like, it was really good until I got busy.
Yeah.
Right? And then it got a little sloppy and sloppier and sloppier over time. But like, if someone hired me today to be a transaction coordinator, and that's the only thing I was doing, I've told people I can crush that role for 2 or 3 days. And that's about it.
Yep. I have another PI consultant who works with nuclear power plants. It's a $350,000 a year job. Turnover cost them $1 million. By the time they train somebody, get them in there, all of that, and they're in the job for a year and they quit, it costs the power plant $1 million in that person. Your only job is to sit there and look at gauges all day. It's all you do. And you get $350,000 a year.
Just to look at the dials.
That's it.
And make sure the dials aren't wrong.
That's all I got to do. They had a 50% turnover rate. And they couldn't figure out why. Well, I'll use Gary Harper, for example. Gary's very, very social.
We love Gary.
Very fast-paced. I love Gary. He's awesome.
We're not putting him in that role.
I would never, I won't be in business without Gary. And Gary and I are a great team. We're great together. So when I say this, I say we're exact opposites, and that's also why it works. And so, right, you put Gary in a room with nobody around and tell him, don't touch anything. Just look at this stuff. And if that dial does this, pick up the phone and call somebody. So responsive work. Don't do anything until something happens. Gary's going to say, well, what do you want me to do while I sit here? Nothing. Don't touch anything. We don't want Gary touching stuff while he's up there. Right? And that was the job. And
don't look at your phone.
Yeah.
Don't look at anything.
Right.
But the dials.
50% fallout rate. And it would cost them $1 million.
Yeah.
You know, because people weren't, and the 350 wasn't enough motivation even to sit there for however many hours.
That sounds like torture.
Dials. Yeah. And so, but that's where assessments come into play. It's also, they say that 95% of people will tell you they're self-aware. And self-aware is knowing how your behavior affects other people. Okay, so 95% of the population
doesn't feel that way.
Thinks they're self-aware though when you talk to them. Only 15% actually are.
Yeah.
So when you sit down in an interview and you're interviewing this person, and essentially the line of questioning is, do you like this job and do you want to do it? They have no idea anyway, especially if you're in the real estate space.
I see. So even like when they're answering your question, they think they're being honest, but they're wrong.
They don't even know. And so, and especially when you get into the real estate space, especially real estate investors and wholesalers and all those kinds of things, where there's not a lot of people working in that industry, there's nobody with experience. So you're hiring somebody with no experience who more likely doesn't know, so they don't know what the job is, and they don't know what motivates them. They're just sitting there saying, well, real estate sounds really cool, and the office looks
I've
cool
always
to
wanted
me.
to get into real estate.
And you seem like a good guy.
They make a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. I watch HGTV. I can do this. And most people doing the interviews are salespeople, so they're selling the job anyway to come work for them. And so this person's all bought in.
Right.
And then they come in, and we're like, wow, what happened? What I find with most companies when I come in, and in the RISE curriculum, we have an employee 9 box where we evaluate employees with it. And there's they tell me I have a team full of stars, which means they're high performers with high potential. Okay, is what it means. And what I find when we evaluate the team is actually they have what we call workhorses, which are high performers with low potential from there. So they're performing, but they're not looking to grow in the company at all. They want to come in, work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and go home.
Make a lot of money.
Yeah, but they work-life balance, and not against work-life balance at all. I have 4 children. I got to pay attention to it. Not against it, but that's what they're looking at. They don't really like the work that they're doing. They may like their boss, they may like the company, they may like the industry they're in, but if I would ask them, do you like the work that you do? The answer would be, well, I mean, not really. I like working here, right? So they're not a fit for the job, and they're not looking to grow within the company from there. Like they're just, again, I don't want to be the sales manager. So they're high performers. And that's what we call work. Now, I would never recommend you ever get rid of a high performer. Like, that's just ludicrous. Why would you get rid of a high performer? Okay. But also, we realize that we don't have a team of stars, which stars are looking to grow. They're looking to move up. They're looking to expand, whether their knowledge, looking to move into another role, looking to really make more money, right? Like all those things. And so we don't have a team of stars. We have a team of workhorses because they can perform because they got to pay their bills.
Right.
They got to pay the rent. But they're not a behavioral match, for the job. They don't like doing it, so they're not really looking to move up in the company and grow from there.
Gotcha. So, looking into I don't know if you like being pigeonholed in this, right?
Okay.
But you're my PI guy.
All right.
I've texted you. We've had conversations about this, right? And so there are people that are watching the show that may be familiar with PI.
Yeah.
There are people that may not may not be familiar with PI. So real quick, can you give everyone a breakdown of what predictive index is?
Sure. So it's a series of assessments, two of them, cognitive and behavioral. We haven't talked about cognitive yet when you talk about that. Cognitive and behavioral assessments that predict long-term job performance based on the concept, not the concept, but human behavior works by people have drives, drives create needs, and behavior is a response to a need. So in other words, if I tell you that I'm thirsty, I would drive for thirst. You would say, well, Austin, you need water, and you predict that my behavior is, I'm going to go get a bottle of water.
Right.
Okay. So drives, needs, and behaviors. That's the science behind it. It's use the military, and predictive index came actually out of the military.
Gotcha.
You take the ASVAB that they have everybody in the military take. When you apply to go in the military, you take the ASVAB, and the military then tells you what you can do in the military. You don't go to the military and tell them what you're going to do. I want to be a fighter pilot. They're going to say, well, tough luck. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. Take these assessments, and we're going to tell you whether you can do that or not.
Right. We can see whether you fit into this box or not.
Correct. But some reason in the hiring process, we sit down with them and we just say, I have a good feeling about this person and I feel like they really, really want it, or they have experience, on their resume, have experience, so they've done it before. Okay. Just because somebody did something before doesn't mean they're good at it.
Right.
Okay.
What does ASVAB stand for?
I have no idea. Ask somebody in the military. I just know it's the assessment they take.
I'm curious because I took the PI, right? I looked at it, and then there was a test I took a long time ago at Keller Williams. Right, so I was being heavily recruited. There was a time where I was actually a realtor that brokerages wanted. You can imagine that, right?
I can't, but
but they had me take this thing. It was the AVA.
Okay.
Right, and it had 5 things.
Yeah.
Right.
Keller Williams has their own behavioral assessment.
Yeah. And I look at those 5 things, and I look at my PI, and they just happen to look very similar.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking they
probably based on the same algorithm.
Right. They were saying and this is our proprietary thing.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if it goes back to this ASVAB thing.
Yeah.
And what was interesting was at that time they had 17 different job profiles, and you had to take the AVA, and it'll tell you that based off what your result is, kind of like this whole fighter pilot thing, we can determine which role you'll be in. Right, owning a brokerage, being the broker, being a team leader that recruits realtors, being a buyer's agent, listing agent, a team leader that has a bunch of agents, transaction, all these different things. Right. And I took my test, and they gave it back to me, and Steve, you don't fit.
Yeah.
In any of these roles. So.
Well, and that's what in real estate, I get called a lot on that because they'll say, hey, this person came in as this profile. Where do they fit in my they'll do it. They'll do it the opposite of what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to build the target, assess people, and then call people in for interviews that match the target. That's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
But they'll say,
to save time.
Yeah. They're I have this person. I really like them. They took the assessment. Here it is. Where do they fit in my company? And my answer oftentimes is nowhere. You only have so many positions in a real estate company, right? 5 or 6 maybe.
Yeah.
You're not Disney World where you can just stick somebody on a different position. Clean a bathroom instead of run a ride. And so they just don't fit. And that's the reality is you might have somebody who's a good person and matches culture, you trust them, all these other things. But they're just not. You just don't have enough positions in your company for them to fit into, and like I said earlier, they have told you what they like doing, and you're going to say, "I'm going to have you do this anyway," even though you just told me you don't like doing it.
Right.
So now it's going to be driven. Their their performance is going to be driven by something other than the fact that they like the job.
Right.
If I come apply for your company in a sales role, I can put together, especially with ChatGPT, a really, really good sales resume. And I've got the pedigree. I'm a sales manager. LinkedIn says I'm a sales manager. I have a business card for it, right? And I broke all these sales records. I can do all this stuff. But so what I'm good at is I am good at selling a highly technical product over and over and over again. That's what my profile is good at selling. People say, what do you know about Myers-Briggs? Absolutely nothing. I sell PI. I know PI, and I know it inside and out.
Right.
Okay?
So you can't do necessarily sitting in a living room with all these different types of personalities.
On the fly, not having all the information, absolutely not. You would have to give me so much information to go on an appointment that you would just be like, oh, so I don't know. You're just going to have to get there and talk it out and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, well, Steve, there's no way. How am I supposed to figure this out when I go? You know, if you handed me that,
the incompleteness of information will drive you crazy.
I have to have everything about it, freedom from risk of error. But if once I know everything about it, I will sell it over and over and over again. So you take like that cup right there. Gary Harper would right now in this moment would sell you that cup. And then he would sell you that Remarkable. And then he would sell you that microphone. And he would just do it on the fly.
Right.
Actually, if I told him to go sell 50 of those cups, he would be like, oh, I don't want to sell 50 cups. Can I sell like 10 and sell something else? Right? They like the variety, the change of pace, things like that. They do really well in real estate acquisitions because it's always different. Every house is different. Every deal is different. Every problem is different to solve. They never have all the information. They go off the fly.
Favorite part about sitting in the living room is the same thing I love about sitting at the poker table. Every hand is different.
Yep.
Every situation is different.
Which is
get to figure out where do all the pieces come together so we can come up with a solution that works for them.
That's awesome.
There are two types of salespeople out there. There are the convincers and there are the sales professionals. For the first 9 years of my career, I was the convincer. Convincers are always out there trying to convince people to meet with them and buy from them. Their strategy is to try to push hard and never take no for an answer. And by focusing on this strategy, they spend a lot of time on cold calling, the next marketing gimmick, features and benefits, how they and their company are the best, following up until the prospect buys or dies. All of this requires time and energy. The problem isn't the model itself, it's that their approach pushes prospects away. And this is the same exact thing that happened to me before I figured out the close more sales formula. The solution? Sell customers exactly what they want to buy. That's right, I said it. We sell customers exactly what they want to buy. Because I would rather get an easy sale with a happy customer instead of a difficult sale from a customer who felt sold. No thanks. I did that before and it sucks. So here's the deal. I explain everything in the Close More Sales course. It's an 11-module course that shows you everything you need to know to close more sales. The best part, you can use this in any industry, not just real estate. So no matter what you're selling and to who you're selling to, this formula will lead to easier sales. Go to closemoresales.com/sales masterclass. One word, closemoresales.com/sales masterclass.
That's awesome. Which is also, though, why the transaction coordinators don't get along with the acquisition reps, because it's been a lot lately, actually, in a lot of meetings. TC is like, we're getting to like 2 weeks before closing, and all of a sudden we find out, oh, there's a tenant in there who's not paying. Why didn't acquisitions pick this up in the initial? And acquisitions like, oh, we don't know, we didn't ask. We got a contract. What more did you want from us? Yeah. Like that. So what comes with that? No doesn't mean no. We don't need all the details and information. We can do it on the fly. Sure, send me on the appointment. I'll figure it out as I'm going.
Right.
I have incomplete information. Also then creates a get to the TC and they don't have all the information.
My admin team doesn't really like me, if you can believe it.
Don't they?
Yeah.
Well, you're an individualist, right?
Yeah.
So you do what you want with whoever you want, whenever you want, however you want.
Exactly.
As long as it makes sense.
As long as it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
we talk about, we have our training. So we have acquisition manager training, right? And then we also have dispo manager training and lead manager training.
Which are all three different profiles.
All three different profiles.
Yeah.
And what I always say to the lead manager on the lead manager calls, right? Because you have they all have their different dynamics. And so the acquisition manager will get upset with the lead manager, like, why did you book this appointment, right? And so one of the things I talk about on our lead manager calls, objections you're having with the sellers, but also objections you're having from the acquisition managers.
Yeah.
Right? Let's talk about how you can sell the acquisition managers better. And the acquisition managers get upset with the dispo managers because dispo managers get upset with the acquisition managers. So I was like, hey, what are some of the challenges you guys are having? So I can help you guys talk through and sell this to each other.
Well, and the different profiles too. So there's three things that we kind of look at is that they communicate, make decisions, and take action different from each other.
Right.
And so you have a lead manager who is taking action, making decisions, and communicating different than an acquisitions manager is. And so when they're looking at the same exact problem, they come up with two completely different solutions.
Yeah.
When I'm in meetings, and it's interesting is my profile being so much different than the typical person in real estate. It's actually exact opposite. So when I walk into a meeting, a consult meeting, I'm approaching the problem completely different than anybody in there does. And I'm looking at them like, how did you come up with that solution? You did what? And then they're looking at me like, where are you coming from? Now it ends up, creating enough friction that we get to where we're going. Like it actually helps of getting the different perspectives in there. But when you're trying to manage all of that, that's why I tell people, okay, if you had half a dozen profiles that all could do acquisitions, let's just say, okay, you now have to manage all of them differently. I was just with a client last week, and his lead managers are 4 different profiles. And if you've ever seen the quadrant in PI, it's got the 4 quadrants.
Yeah.
So each one of them, he had 5. It was 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and 2 down here. I looked at the sales manager. I'm like, I am so sorry. I'm like, you have to walk into that lead management meeting, and when you say something, all 4 of them hear something completely different.
Yeah.
You're speaking 4 different languages. No wonder, and they were having a really hard time getting them all on the same page. No wonder they all hear 4 different things. They all take action completely different.
Yeah.
So even if you could say these 6 profiles could work in that one, as a manager, why would you want to do that to yourself?
Yeah.
You
I
know,
never thought about that one.
Yeah, you go down to, and that's where like from building a team, we often miss that. I mean, I know you. I saw your basketball jerseys, and I know you like basketball.
Yeah.
But you look at these teams, Brooklyn Nets a couple years ago. You stick like 3 all-stars on this team, and they can't make the playoffs.
Right.
And you're sitting there thinking like, what just happened here?
What was the bronze team, the USA Dream Team that took bronze? It's like doesn't matter. You got a bunch of alphas if they can't play together.
Right. They can't communicate, take action, make decisions the same way, and it just doesn't work.
So for everyone that's listening, right? Like if they're a wholesaler or a flipper, or if they run a different type of business and they have outside salespeople, what are the things that someone should be looking for on a PI for an outside salesperson?
Yeah.
And then which are the profiles that generally line up with that?
Sure. So first thing you're looking for so there's 2 different kinds of sales. There's hunting and there's farming sales, you can say, right? Hunting is, I've never sold to you before, and I probably will never sell to you again.
A little more transactional.
Yeah. Farming is, I've either sold to you before, or I'm going to sell to you again. I'm building a relationship that's going to be a long-term thing, stuff like that. 2 different kinds. So acquisitions is hunting. And I struggle to call acquisition sales because we're not selling anything. And I'm a very literal person. Like you're not selling anything. The only thing you're really selling, and here I am talking to you, the sales trainer, you're selling the fact that you're the best option for them.
Yeah.
Like that. That's what you're selling. And so it's like, okay, you're the buyer, but now there's a lot of the same skills involved, which is why we're like salespeople.
When we're buying houses, because I actually had this conversation with RJ Bates the other day. It's not really, you're not really like a salesperson. Like, no, you really are, right? But we're not selling them to discount their house 30%. We're selling someone that needs to sell.
Right.
So my job is to sell you on selling your house to me versus the 3 other guys.
Exactly.
Right. So I'm selling me. I'm selling trust, certainty, peace of mind. That's what I sell.
Which is why the people component is so important in this business, even amongst other businesses.
Right.
Is other businesses, the people component is more operational based.
Yeah, my company is this. Honda's got this track record.
Yeah.
All these other things.
Do you really care? The girl at McDonald's, you're going to interact them for all of like 5 seconds, and she's probably taking the order of the next person. You don't really care. Here's my credit card. Let's move on.
Right.
Do you care what the burger looks like when it comes out? And it's McDonald's, but you get my point. Like, yeah, you care that they got it right. It's more about the operation side of people. With this business, it is. I mean, the lead managers are the first person that they interact with in your company. If that interaction isn't good, I mean,
it all falls apart.
Right. And I heard this not long ago that you have to realize who you're competing with. You're competing with like Disney World. You're competing with all the other companies that are calling them too, not the other wholesalers, because they just got off the call with somebody who's got great customer service, and then they get a call with your person, and they're like, "Oh, what just happened here?" Like,
I never looked at it from their perspective.
Yeah, I heard that not long ago with that, and it's like that's who you're competing with when you're dealing with phone sales. Is everybody else who's on the phone, not just your direct competitors. And then the interaction at the house, and they can work with you on all of that. Right. But it's going to come down to the people component of it. But in acquisitions, first thing we're looking at is this a dominant or a collaborative role? And the answer is it's dominant. There's conflict going on. I still have to tell you that, by the way, your house, we're only going to pay you half of what you think you're going to get for your house, whatever that number is. Right? I've got to engage in some amount of conflict there. I got to be comfortable with that. Right? I also have to be competitive. Sales is competitive.
Yeah.
One reason I don't like sales. I'm collaborative, I'm not real competitive. And so like to tell me like, let's crush this, let's do this. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Okay. Like, we're going to play basketball at CG. Yeah, whatever. Sure. I guess. So it's like, so it's got to be dominant. They got to be comfortable with conflict. They have to enjoy a challenge. Right. That's the first part of it. Second is the social side. Now acquisitions is interesting in that it's one of the only sales roles, I'm air quoting for those of you who aren't seeing, the sales roles that requires somebody to be more more dominant than people focused. So acquisitions can actually be kind of low B. Whereas most every other sales position out there is high B, high social. They're interacting with people. Now, it does help if they're high B, but I run into a lot of acquisition reps that are low B because they don't really they need to not need the seller to like it.
Yeah.
Because they're about to tell. Now, your inside sales reps different. They've got to need them to like them.
Yeah.
But when they get inside that house, yes, they're building trust. Yes, they're building a solution. I don't want them to be a jerk to them. That's what I'm talking about. I feel like that's some soft skills that kind of come in there.
Yeah.
But I need
Don't be
them,
offensive.
Right. Don't be offensive.
Offend them, but don't be offensive.
Right. But I need you to not sit on the couch and cry with them for 2 hours.
Right.
Like that. And then pay him $10,000 more. Gary stopped going on appointments when he was doing wholesaling for that very reason. He'd sit on the couch, cry with him for 2 hours, and then say, I guess I can give you $10,000 more. I need them to be more dominant than social, which means that more about the goal, which is like, we've got to make money. I'm sorry you're losing your house, but like, I can't not make money and there's risk involved here. So really the combination is I need them more dominant than social. The social can kind of float as long as they have some soft skills.
So then would a persuader have a problem in that seat?
Yes.
I look at persuader as basically a nicer maverick.
Yes, so Gary's a persuader.
Yeah.
Now, and that's where like, okay, this is like going way down a rabbit hole with it, okay? That A and that B, that dominance and that social, if they're close to each other on a persuader. So persuaders are more social than task-oriented, okay, goal-oriented. Mavericks are more goal than task-oriented. So if the persuaders A and B, the B is higher than the A, but they're close to each other, it's okay because they can flex kind of over if they need to. But if you had somebody like Gary Harper, whose B is almost off the chart, and then his A is high, it's like maybe 1.5 sigma high, but the B is very high. It's like a lot more people than task focused. He wants everybody to win, okay? Those persuaders struggle. They do great in dispo.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking because I got Gino Paloma, right? Like,
Yep.
In Atlanta. Like for me, I always call him Boy Wonder. Like he's like the best person that's gone through our training, right? And he's a persuader, but he can make it work. That's why I was curious.
Yeah, I have to pull Gino's. My guess is his B and his A are very close to each other. So
If I remember correctly, it's just a little bit higher. But then we got like, Paul Sparks, my partner in the Whale Club, and like he's like, I could not stand going to appointments because I am just drained.
yeah,
And I was like, I could sit 4 seller appointments a day.
yeah. It's really weird that, and that's what people even say. They'll look at like a reference profile, like a persuader. Oh, will a persuader work? And I'm like, well, where's the B and the A at to each other? Because that's where it gets a little more detailed as to what it is.
So going back to acquisitions.
Yeah.
So I look at acquisitions
Fast-paced.
is
Sorry.
and I also look at acquisitions a lot, kind of like listing agents as well. I think they're very similar in behavior. So high A,
High A.
B is not as important. It's nice, but it's not as
Yeah,
important.
it's just right. A's got to be to the right of the B is what you're looking for.
Yeah.
In any kind of a hunting, it's got to be about the goal. I mean, to use like hunters for example. I don't care that I took a life. I need to be like blunt. Like it's it's okay.
Yeah.
I got food.
Served
For
a
my,
greater
I
good.
got food for my family and like that.
It served a purpose.
Right, served a purpose.
So-
And so in that scenario, it's which also, and this is where, to go into all the other parts of what we coach on, which is culture, is often why this industry gets a bad name because it's made up of hunters who then don't have any values and don't care about the consumers and like that. At least that's the impression they have.
That's the outside looking in.
Yeah, that's outside looking in.
So looking
to be
at
very
that-
careful with that when you're hiring that profile, that you really push your values, your culture, things like that. That hey, we're here to help people who are in a tight spot.
Right.
Even though we've got to win.
We have to win. So Mavericks, everyone knows that, right? Captains,
Yep.
venturers.
Yep.
So what about strategists?
No.
No. Okay.
So
what's wrong with
Yeah.
in what ways would a strategist struggle in this role?
So in general with sales, you don't want high So we talked about, I didn't get that. C is fast paced. Outside sales is fast paced. Inside sales is slow, high, more patient. So it's kind of your difference. If you're looking at sticking somebody behind a computer screen all day doing inside sales, you want somebody with more patient, higher C and PI. Outside sales, lower C. And then the D, which is the bottom one, which is their drive for rules and structure. Generally in sales, you want somebody who has a low drive for rules and structure. And the reason is because no doesn't mean no to them.
Right.
So I'm a high D. I have a high drive for rules and structure. I would be closer to a strategist than I would be to a maverick. My problem in sales is that when you tell me no, I say okay. So if I'm on a sales call for Sharper and the client says, never mind, I'm not going to hire you guys. Gary will say, how'd the sales call go? I said, they said that no, they're not interested. Well, why were they not interested? I'm like, I don't know, Gary. They said no. Give me the number, I'll call them. They didn't really mean no. You didn't provide enough value to them. You didn't whatever. Right? I mean.
They said no, but they didn't really understand why they said no.
Yeah. Sales tactics are get to know so you can overcome the no.
Yeah.
And when you take somebody who has a high drive for rules and structure, like a strategist, like me, or like me, when somebody says no or says, call me back in 6 months, that means call me back in 6 months. I mentioned earlier, I'm a literal interpretationist. So whereas somebody like you would say, I'll call him back next week.
Yeah.
Right? Like that. Because that didn't mean 6 months from now. That just meant call me back.
Yeah, I get in trouble from time to time about rules. All right.
Yeah.
So
that's why strategists would struggle. However, if you put them in a high technical position where there's a lot of details they have to know, like I have a client that does stack testing. You know, they test for the EPA that stacks on factories. That salesperson, it's a highly technical sales role.
Yeah.
They're a high D. It's a little bit different.
So engineering sales would be great. Software sales.
Yes.
So that's outside sales. Let's talk about inside sales, lead manager.
Sure.
Right? What are we looking for there?
So collaborative, which is kind of surprising, but when you think about when somebody calls in, what's the interaction you want to have with them? And that is, we can help you. Collaborative, listen. Don't engage in conflict.
Right.
Get the information, schedule the appointment. Right. So collaborative, and then high social. In particular, where I mentioned that acquisitions is more dominant than social, inside you flip it. When you put an A over B on the phone, more dominant than social on the phone, they sound robotic. When you stick somebody who's more people than task focused, they sound empathetic. So you want a B over an A on the phone. So collaborative, high social, likes talking to people. They're patient because you want them to sit there and listen to what's going on, right? Not interrupt the person on the phone. Be willing to listen to them. Oh, I'm so sorry, all that kind of stuff, right? More patient. And then now they are low D as well. Just because they said they wanted retail for their house is in perfect condition doesn't mean that they're going to take retail in their house is in perfect condition.
Right.
So, get the appointments scheduled, get them moved on to the next phase. So we're looking at like a collaborator or a promoter. Now, to say that, that's ideal, like somebody who's going to sit in that role for a very long period of time.
Yeah.
Now, to go back to, you mentioned persuaders earlier. If you're looking to move somebody, you're looking to use lead management as a feeder for acquisitions, persuaders are the perfect match to go from lead management into acquisitions.
That makes total sense.
They can kind of move through that as long as that A and that B aren't too far apart from each other.
So promoters and collaborators
are your ideal. And that's what you're going to want the persuader to adapt to, is that role. But they're already B over A. They're low C, and that's why they might need to struggle, and which is why a persuader starting off in lead management would be career path is they're going to move into acquisitions and probably going to do it in 6 to 12 months.
Gotcha.
Like that.
All right. Let's talk about Dispo.
Yeah.
Is Dispo much different than a lead manager?
So Dispo is one that I've seen a few different profiles work in it. I've seen lead manager, the collaborators and promoters work okay in it. And it kind of says in the name, we're promoting the property to sell it.
Right. 'Cause I love promoters in that role.
Yeah. It also kind of depends on, so there's a couple different ideas out there lately. I've been hearing pop up. I'm jumping to my consulting things. I talk to so many people every week over Dispo. Some of it is, some people like selling to the same buyers over and over and over again. If you're selling to the same buyers, your VIP buyers list, same people buy from you, promoters and collaborators, right? Get along with the buyers.
We're friends. Repeat
Right,
business.
we're friends, right? We're going to do business with them again. If you got to cut them a deal here and there, that's fine. Things like that. Then there's another kind of idea going on of all I want are brand new buyers. Just get a bunch of new buyers. New Western takes that approach.
Yeah.
Just keep building the buyers list, get new buyers. Now, new buyers also tend to be a little more, they take more work.
Hand-holding.
Right. They've never done the process before, but they pay a little bit more.
Right.
Things like that. So there's two different approaches kind of going on out there. If you're looking for a new buyers, now you're kind of back to you need a hunter kind of profile. We're going to sell to you once, and I mean, not see you for 12 months. It's going to take you 12 months to flip this house.
Right.
Or I'm just constantly adding new buyers to it. Then a persuader would kind of fit more into that role. They're a little more hunting than like a promoter or collaborator is. That's why I say you kind of got to evaluate within your company, what's your strategy? Because that strategy, the person that's going to enjoy executing that strategy is going to be a little different than what it may be for somebody else's company.
So those are the salespeople.
Yep.
But we require more than just salespeople to run our organization.
Yeah, in a little bit.
Transaction coordinator.
Yeah.
What am I looking for in a transaction coordinator?
So transaction coordinators are interesting in that in PI, there's factor combinations, how the combinations work with each other. So for example, somebody with a high A, low C, so dominant, fast-paced is proactive. High patient, collaborative are more responsive. The person you want running the nuclear thing is responsive. Don't do anything. You don't want a proactive person working nuclear, right? So in transaction coordination, and this is, I actually had title companies, so I began to understand what was going on because people were hiring people with title company experience, thinking I'm going to hire them from my TC because they worked at a title company, and then they came in and they were terrible, and they're like, I don't know what just happened. They worked for a title company for 10 years. Well, in a title company, think about what are they trying to do? They're trying to protect, mitigate risk. So you have somebody who's responsive and careful with rules, right? Slow paced, all those kinds of things. Well, especially in any of it, we need this transaction to move like now.
Yeah. I don't care what happens. Just get it done.
Right. So I need a proactive person, high A, low C. So that's like the main factor when you're looking at a TC. If you don't have a high A, low C TC, they're probably underperforming. And now that I said that, go back and look. It happens almost every time. And I say it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're right." Usually,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, you're right. Because where I struggle is I haven't hired high A, low C. Because usually if they're high A, low C, I'm trying to put them in a sales role.
Right. And so it's a proactive. This is what you'll hear. You'll come in the morning. You say, "Where are we at in this file?" And they'll say, "I don't know. Let me call." Responsive. You walk in, "Where are we at in this file?" "I just talked to them yesterday." Proactive.
Yeah, that responsive thing is where I die every time.
Yep.
Like a little part of me dies every time. I was like, "Well, let me get an update." It's like, I'm asking you for the update.
Right. They're responding.
Yeah.
And so that proactive profile is the best one. The B I found can be almost anywhere. And again, it's kind of like the sale. Like, okay, if your title company loves your TC, that's a problem. They shouldn't hate them, but they shouldn't think. As soon as I walk in and they say, "Well, the title company," I've heard this many times. The title company, they really like our TC. I'm like, yeah, that needs to go on the issues list. They're like, do you know Hunter Jarvis?
Yeah.
He told me that he's got one of the fastest conversion rates I've ever seen. And I was like, wow, he does at least last I talked to him, he was doing the TC work. And he's like, yeah, I have to buy my title company a really good Christmas gift. He's like, because I'm like a jerk to them all year long. That's what he told me. But if they like them, again, I don't want them to hate them. They need to get along. But so the B is kind of that one that can float.
But
you need a high D is the other thing.
Yeah, so we had one, right? And she was a specialist.
Okay, yep.
But like we would have the title company. Like this is one we had, and title company would complain about her. And I was like, what are you guys upset about? Like she's like rough around the edges. Like, yeah, but she's getting the job done.
Yeah,
right.
Yep.
Loved her. Never had to wait for an update, right? Like she is impatient. Like I want this done now. Why is it not done yet? She was great. So we're looking for a high A, low C.
High
B
A, low
doesn't
C,
really matter.
It doesn't matter. High D.
So
it's got to be right. It's a legal document. It has to be filled out properly.
So what profiles are we looking for that?
Analyzer will work for it. Strategist, if the A is high enough and the C is low enough. I'm not good with the preferred profile names because I always use I look at their exact profile. Like I'm looking at A over C with a high D. If they have that, I'm good.
Right.
Let's see. Strategist might work. Analyzer might work. Let me think. Man, you're testing my PI knowledge in this one. Anyway, those are kind of what you look for.
Not scholar.
But those combinations are what you want
in
that TC. But again, when you pull a resume of somebody who's worked at a title company, it's usually not what you get. You get a guardian.
Yeah.
That's what you usually get. You get like, yeah, you get artisans, and it's like those are all responsive, high detailed person, but all responsive. They're generally low A, high C's, which is why when you call the title company and they're kind of like dragging their feet on it,
Yeah, pisses me off.
it's because they're all there. They're responsive people who are worried about risk, and so they're collaborative, steady, and that's the profile they hire.
All right, so I think that was probably the biggest takeaway, at least for me here so far, and I think probably for people watching, because we've all heard about hiring mavericks, captains, and venturers.
Yeah.
We've all heard that.
Yeah.
That's all we ever hear about.
Yeah.
But the TC, I think, is often overlooked as an important part of your team. What about integrator?
So, yeah, that's probably the biggest question I get.
Is it?
Is the integrator.
Okay.
I will start off in that the visionary integrator relationship, the most important thing is trust. Just take PI out of the mix. If
Right.
they don't trust each other, it doesn't even matter from there.
Of course.
From there, looking at to kind of go a little broader of a company, if you have a heavy operations company, you want an integrator who is high D, high rules and structure. If it's a sales organization, it's a lower D. It also kind of depends. Okay, the easy answer is a captain. So there's that. Like it's a captain.
Right.
High A, high B, A to the right of the B, low C with what we call a corporate hook. The D comes up a little bit. So that looks like that. Is a captain is the easy answer from there.
Yeah. So captain's my favorite profile, and they can sit in every seat except for finance for me.
Yep.
Right. But what I have found is what's been working for me recently is the strategist.
Okay.
Right. Because the strategist is like I want it right now, and I want it correct.
Yeah.
And now we're starting to see like we're hitting milestones, we're hitting targets, we're hitting deadlines.
So this is what you're going to do with strategists.
Yeah.
And there's been several people who have had very good success with strategists. Chris Johns, you know him? He's a strategist.
Makes sense.
Yep. What you'll find with most strategists, when they come into an organization, there becomes high turnover. They're low social. They don't need people to like it. Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Right. That's Chris.
Yep.
That's Chris to a T.
And so I remember when Mark put it up, and he had high turnover when he brought Chris on, and Mark was pointing that he needed to replace the staff. But I was chuckling a little bit because I'm like, okay, and you brought in the right guy for that because it was somebody who didn't care whether turnover was high or not.
Yeah.
You know, from there, it's like you don't like it, okay. I'm a low social. So when I was buying stores that were underperforming, after store number 1, I fired the entire staff when I walked in the door on day 1. So I mentioned that earlier that I looked at the GM like they weren't going to be there long anyway because I was firing the entire staff.
Yeah.
I didn't care. And so your strategists are really good at holding people accountable. And by the way, holding accountable means that something's going to happen. It's actually what accountability means. And people always say that I'm going to hold people accountable. And I'm like, well, then what are you going to do about it? Well, I'm going to hold them accountable. No. That's not what that means. Accountable is that something's going to happen.
Right.
You don't do this, this is going to happen. And so the low Bs are really good at holding people accountable because they don't need them to like them. Now, it doesn't mean they can't. It doesn't mean they can't interact with people. They just don't. They don't have a drive.
Take it or leave it.
Right.
So we hired a sales manager. He was at the last CG, and he's a strategist.
Okay.
And I actually had that conversation with him today. It's like, hey, I need you to hold me accountable. I know, like, I pay you.
Did his eyes light up?
He was like, I'm appreciating that you're giving me this because, yeah, you need to be more accountable, right? So, but I got him. I got Manny, who you met here. He's a strategist, right? And we put him in this role, and like now, like, yeah, you might feel a certain way, but the deadlines are the deadlines.
So what I have found, and I know we're talking about integrators here, is that a lot of organizations like certain profiles. I was just talking to a client of ours in the Northeast, and he found that acquisitions for him, and I told him, you need to be prepared because when you tell people what you hired, they're going to tell you you're crazy. I forgot what it was. It was, again, a profile exact opposite of what you think it should be. And even when he said it, I'm like, you have what? He's like, yeah, I've got 3 of them. What do you think? We're doing a PI training. I'm like, let's walk through this. Well, the way he manages, the way he does his sales process, the way he wants to interact with his customers, that is the profile for it, for him and his organization.
Yeah.
So as an integrator, if you hire a high D integrator, this is what's going to happen, okay? You're a strategist. I'm a guardian. I'm a COO. If you notice, I mentioned this morning that I am earlier in the podcast. I'm the COO and I'm the finance manager. If my I was a sales manager. If the sales manager quits, you know what I'm going to do? Hire another sales manager. I am not taking over the sales department.
Right.
My finance person quits, I'll just do finance. My operations person quits, I want operations fall. I don't care. I will gravitate towards operations and finance.
Right.
I will not gravitate towards sales. Now, you take somebody who is a low D integrator, a captain, venturers, something like that. If their sales manager quits, they'll just sit in the sales manager for a while. Eric Gitson. Eric is like the sales manager and the COO because he likes the sales department and it's a big part of their business. So he kind of he's kind of sits over that. But if they lose their finance person,
He's not doing that.
he's not sitting in finance. He's going to hire a finance person. So you hire an integrator. You kind of have to look at your company and say, where do I want this integrator to sit right now? And that's why it's important for you to know what your strategy is in business.
Yeah.
Because that integrator is going to implement the strategy you want. So if your strategy is, I'm a fast-growing, gunslinging company, we'll deal with the finances later, because out of the gate we're going to be doubling every year, then you need an integrator that's going to think like that.
Yeah.
Which is going to be your mavericks, your captains, your venturers, all those things. Now, if you're a well-established company and you're like, okay, things are going well, we got to make sure operations and finance are tight, you're going to bring an integrator in who's going to focus on those types of things.
Well, yeah, that makes total sense. The reason why I like strategists is that, remember I was saying earlier I took the AVA, and it said, like, here are your 2 greatest weaknesses. And I completely forgot about what I'm good at, right? Because I just go straight to, like, where do I suck? Right? My 2 greatest weaknesses, giving praise, which probably is not a shocker for you, right? And holding people accountable.
Yep.
Right? And I think that's where the high C on the individualist kicks in, right? So high C, low D, I don't even pay attention to details anyway. So what am I going to hold them accountable to if I'm not even paying attention to details?
Yeah, you're patient and it doesn't really matter. It's okay.
We'll figure that out later.
Right.
So that's why I need a strategist, because they're the ones to be like, no, we're going to hold a line here. And that's where it's been really helpful for me.
And that's where to go back to like self-awareness. You've got to have the number, I read a survey of Fortune 500 CEOs that the number one skill that every leader has is self-awareness, oddly enough.
Yeah.
And as a leader, are you self-aware enough to know what you need? I was watching that show not long ago, Men Who Built America, and they were interviewing Mark Cuban. And Mark Cuban said, you always have to have the opposite of what you are. That sounds really good, but when you bring in the opposite, guess what? They take action, make decisions, and communicate completely different than you are.
Yeah.
Gary and I get into meetings, they get a little lively because we both are like, I'm like, what are you thinking? He's like, I don't know, what are you thinking? Now, massive amount of trust, like I started with. We both know we have each one's best interest at heart, and we're trying to grow a company. And so Gary and I are best friends,
right?
And it's always good. But if you walked into a Sharper meeting or a closed door meeting with me and Gary and Brandon and Susan, like it's interesting. You'd be like, who are these people? Because it turns on, and by the end of it, we're hugging it out. We're great friends, and let's go Disney World or something together, like that. We're good friends. But are you self-aware enough to know what your behavior is, and to then emotionally intelligent enough to hire the opposite, because it's really what you need. Are you willing to do that? Because the amount of friction that's going to create in your business is going to be a lot, but it's also what helps you grow. It's the Roy to the Walt Disney. You could literally go through the list over and over again of visionaries and integrators who are opposites of each other that accomplish great things. But as leaders, are you really willing to do that?
Yeah.
Most aren't, and and people who are listening are thinking, "Oh, of course I am." You are until you walk into a meeting and they look at you and they say, "Yeah, we're not doing that," and the friction kicks in. And so what you've done is you've realized that I need that friction, I need that yin to my yang, and that's what's going to help the business be where it needs to be. And now it's created.
Yeah, and for me, it is grating at times. I hear these things like, "No, I want you to say yes." Right? Yep. And I got to sell it. It's like, no, guys, I got to draw the picture or paint the picture. I got to show here's why. So I find myself selling more.
Yes.
In these meetings.
Yep. Oh, Gary sells in the meetings with it. And often with us, we'll go into a meeting with internally at Sharper, and Gary will pitch the vision and what he wants, all those kinds of things. And then I will have to tell him, like, okay, either I need you to be quiet for a few minutes and don't say anything, or leave the room, because what we're about to do is going to really make you angry. because the way that I solve a problem makes it look like it'll look like his idea is a really bad idea. And I finally am like, okay, stop listening to me and let me work through what I'm working through because I solve problems differently than you. Then when I get to there, because I'm going to get there, then we'll come back together, and Gary's just like, let's just go do it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I've had conversations with Gary.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, let's do this, and this. Is like, hey, Steve, I think everything sounds great. Let me talk to Austin and Brandon. Because they're going to be the ones that are going to say, no, this is a terrible idea. Yeah. And going back to detail-oriented, right? I just didn't realize, right? So everyone's watching this right now. They might be wondering why this looks different. I didn't even bring it up yet, right? Because I'm not even focused on this. So we're doing a little bit of remodeling. It looks a little bit different than normal, but that's the reason why it looks like this. So, but and then I want, like, where does the Guardian?
So my podcast is going to look completely different than everybody else's podcast. This is like a very unique podcast.
It is.
Yeah.
It'll never look this way again.
This will be the only one.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I find Austin McCurdy, this guy's done this amazing stuff with Papa John's and Sharper. I was like, man, I got to have this guy. Where do I fit this guy in my company? He's a Guardian. You spent countless weeks going back and forth with a homeowner only to lose a deal because the seller changed their mind, another wholesaler made an unreasonable offer, or what the seller needs from the sale, you just can't pay. Now imagine you've got the ultimate control on a property that you just locked up, meaning you're on title and every decision has to go through you, eliminating virtually every external threat. That's why the installment method was created. Through installment payments, you have full control of the property as your name is now on the title. Any decision the seller wants to make now has to be approved by you. No longer can they pull out equity, go with another buyer, or change their mind. Imagine combining the best of creative finance with the flexibility of marketing the property on the MLS to collect the most amount of revenue possible, all while having total control of the property. This is just the tip of the iceberg. The concept here is simple, but implementing is challenging. So visit wholesale2024.com to learn more so that you'll never have another deal blow up.
Back to strategy of what's your strategy of your company. Okay. If your strategy right now is to increase profitability, okay, not revenue, profitability, okay, like that's or operations. Like we've got to, really dial in our operation side. I play defense. So we break it down to offense and defense. I always play defense. I always approach every problem from that. As soon as we come in and we say, hey, we have a problem, we're not making money, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to say, okay, what are we cutting right out of the gate? Yeah. Gary's going to tell you how much more revenue can we generate. Right. You say, well, of course, we're not going to cut anything. We're just going to drive revenue, which is why the two of them coming together works and you find that middle ground. So if it's something that we're playing defense, which is saving money, improving operations, looking for efficiencies, all of those kinds of things like that, that's where I'm gonna thrive at. So for me, bring me in your finance department, from there, and anything with operations, I'm gonna streamline that. You can bring me into a sales department, but I'm going to streamline it. Is what I'm going to do, which is going to drive the salespeople nuts. From there, you do not want to put me in sales. In real estate, oddly enough, I would do all right in marketing, real estate marketing, not almost any other industry's marketing. Real estate is very data driven. So actually, same thing. If you hire, like TC, you hire somebody who has a marketing background to do your marketing for your real estate company, usually it doesn't work.
Yeah, they just want to spend money.
Yeah. Brandon, our CMO, is a collaborator, very concerned about how people feel about our brand. That's what he's concerned with.
Yeah.
Not data points, not like those kinds of things. You take me, and I'm going to say, well, I don't really care how the consumer feels about it, but what are all the, give me all the data. And
does this drive revenue? Are we profitable on this
results?
Campaign?
Right. And so that's where you want to hire that. So I could do your marketing, I could do your finance, I do your operations, maybe a little bit of project management from there, but not anything in your sales department. So if you're trying to grow your company very, very quickly, a rapid pace, and that's just like a new startup, I'm not who you want.
We had a broker, right? So when I had my brokerage, I had a broker. She was a Guardian.
Okay.
And she was great. Everyone hated her. She was great. Because when we finally got audited, not because we did anything wrong, it's just every 7 years, that's just the way it is, right? You can't go 7 years without getting audited as a real estate brokerage. So I survived long enough. So I was clean enough until they audited me in some year because they just had to.
Yeah.
And if I was the broker of record, well, I guess technically I was the broker of record. I had to sign some documents to give her the authority to do broker stuff.
Yeah.
So, but if I was the one reviewing it, like everything got approved, right? I was constantly doing like last minute reviews. It's like, it's good enough. It's like, it's missing initial. It's good enough, right?
That's funny.
I just approved everything. If we were missing one initial, she'll just kick it back over and over and over again until the salespeople got it right.
Yeah.
And so when we had our audit, passed it, flying colors. It was like nearly a perfect score. But man, the salespeople hated her.
Yep.
Right?
Our sales department, it's funny because they'll call me. I had a conversation not long ago. They sold something that they made up on the fly. And
Something I would do.
They call me and they're like, I got a hold of it. And I'm like, I call them like, what is this? And they're like, well, the client needed whatever. I'm like, we don't do this. And they're like, well, we made a sale. Did you not want us to make a sale? And I'm like, not if we don't have it. No, I don't want you to sell it. And they're like, well, I know we made a sale with the deals. But that's their approach to it. So yeah, they don't like me very much in the sales department, but that's, yeah.
I turned in a contract last year, right? So we went through kind of a reorg. And so I'm out in the field and I'm signing contracts. I was like, I don't like the way this contracts. So I'm just like writing things into the contract. And I turned it in, and the TC's like, what am I supposed to do with this? It's like, just what it says.
Yeah.
And then she's like, fine, whatever. And then she turns it into the title company. The title company's like, what are we supposed to do with this? Right? So I had to rewrite the contract to say that purchase price to reflect seller walking away with $60,000 net. But I just struck out the purchase price and like seller walks away with $60,000.
Yeah.
Right?
It's funny.
They did not like that. So I had to redo the contract to say seller nets or purchase price to be whatever nets sellers.
High D, low C's, which should be your TC, are there consequences to not following the rules.
Right.
Like it's an intensity that's added to it.
Yeah.
Follow the rules or I'll break your hand.
Yeah.
Is like that. And so with that, like you if they were high D, low C, that's what they looked and they said, no, we can't do this.
Right.
Which is the people that
We want in that seat.
you want in that seat, but are you willing to put up with it?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know who they hate more, our sellers or me. So looking at your life and business today,
Yeah.
what would you do if money was no object?
I'll say I'm a low B, so you're supposed to ask me these questions ahead of time so I have time to process them. So if money was not an object, what would I do right now? Oddly enough, for not being like a low C, I like to travel. People are like, you travel every week. How do you do that? And a certain amount of travel I like.
Yeah.
I probably would do a lot of traveling. To say that, in the last 30 days, I've been in Rome, Cairo, Luxor, Istanbul, London, Paris, Edinburgh, Scotland, Dublin, Ireland, other parts of Ireland.
The last 30 days?
Philly, Toronto, and now Phoenix since May 16th.
Wow. Where's Luxor?
Yeah. South of Cairo, an hour flight. The ancient city of Thebes, for all you history people out there.
I had no idea. I didn't know that was a real city.
Yeah. And
only
you
know
just thought it was the pyramid.
Well, I knew it wasn't that. That's why I had to ask.
Yeah, Luxor is built on the ancient city of Thebes, which was the ancient kingdom, the head of the Middle Kingdom, I think.
Who was in Rome?
Egypt. Who was in Rome?
Like,
I was on my way to Egypt, so I stopped in Rome for a couple of days on the way.
Check out.
Same thing with Istanbul.
Get an espresso.
Yeah.
Just
Pizza.
enjoy
Pizza
the
everywhere.
scene.
It was great. Yeah, it was nice.
Hang out by the Tower of Pisa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's not in Rome, but
That's not in Rome. Whatever. What is your epic life goal?
So I'm what I realized in personal experiences for me is that I don't have a lifetime goal. Like I kind of like, why am I placed on this earth? And I have some personal experiences to why I don't have that. I more go with shorter term purposes, 10-year kind of stuff. It's kind of the world that I live in. And so right now, and Gary and I spent a lot of time talking about this, what I realized I really enjoy in purpose is helping business owners avoid, I have a lot of, just the number of employees that I had and then how much I did in that period, a 10-year period of time, was just a lot. And so helping business owners avoid some of the pain that I had to go through with it is something that I really, really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And so like epic life goal is, how many many business owners can I help? I get a conversation this morning with somebody because it's not just about business, but also the personal life. Personal life of being a business owner. It's 3% of the population are entrepreneurs. So I'm a math guy, so I look and say, if 3% of the population are entrepreneurs, what are the odds that you married a fellow entrepreneur who also understands what it takes to do business? You mentioned, I don't know if it was during this or beforehand, about, a certain phone call coming in and your wife understanding that if that phone rings, she understands that. And that is also as business owners, we're on 24/7. It never turns off.
Right.
We go on vacation, it doesn't turn off. And we get a lot of flexibility, but we're still always on. And that's really, really hard to understand to people who aren't, my dad was a blue collar worker who came home from work, changed out his uniform, and never talked to anybody again. And as business owners, that mental toll on your personal life is massive. And at the same time, most business owners will tell you, I'm doing this for my family. That's usually what they'll say.
That's what they'll say. I don't believe it.
No. But as Gary likes to say, their perception is your reality. Is that their perception of it? And we can sit and say, like, I'm doing this for that reason, but is that their perception of it? And so working with business owners to understand, like, there will be another deal. Like, your kids won't be this age another day.
Yeah.
Things like that. It's something that I talk a lot to when I'm in clients and offices is like, okay, what is the priority here? What are we trying to accomplish? And setting up a system for them where they still know what's going on in their business but yet can focus on what they need to focus on.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to say for the first 10 to 12 years of my business, I genuinely believed I was doing this for my family. And now I know I was lying to myself the whole time.
Yeah.
Right. But it took a long time to figure that out. I missed something a moment ago. We talked about all these different profiles.
Yeah.
What do you do with an individualist?
Whatever they want. Oddly enough, so individualists I find do well in training. Individualists are like this utility player that can almost play in any role.
Right.
I'm not a Chicago Cubs fan, not much right now, but 2016 Cubs won the World Series. MVP of the World Series was Ben Zobrist.
Okay.
Hardly anybody even knows who Ben Zobrist is.
No idea who that is, yeah.
MVP of the World Series for the one time the Cubs have won the World Series, right? In the 100 years. What position did Ben Zobrist play? All of them. I could rattle off to you all 9 players from that team on the Cubs, what everybody played, and then Ben Zobrist is like number 10 because he's what got them through the season because the first baseman could sit for a while because Ben Zobrist could play first base. He could bat anywhere in the batting order.
Yeah.
So he wasn't our best first baseman. He wasn't our best second baseman, et cetera, but he could play every position and was the MVP. Individualists usually fit that role. You can put them almost anywhere, and they'll be a 7 or 8. They're not going to be your star, but they're going to do a really good job, but you usually want to move them around. So they'll go sit in acquisitions for a little while, kind of hold down the fort for you, and they'll do a nice job, and then you might want to move them over to something different. They do a good job of training. I was just talking to Phil Green about, or Eric Gitson about this. They also are great at auditing, oddly enough.
Really?
Yeah, they're really good at auditing because they're dominant, so they have
Auditing
no problem.
of calls.
Auditing anything.
Okay.
They're really good they're dominant, so they have no problem telling people that it's wrong. They're low social, so they don't really need people to like the fact that I just told you it's wrong. That comes with the conflict. But they're patient because auditing takes some patience, digging through things. But then you would think it would be high D behavior, high rules, and like, are they following the rules? It's actually low D behavior because they have to come up with either A, creative ways to look for the problems, or B, creative solutions to propose to the team. So it's actually not high D. So auditing is actually something they do really good at.
Interesting.
I'm actually moving Susan Harper into that role in Sharper of auditing the entire ecosystem. She's an individualist like you are.
Yeah, I think she'd be great at that.
Yeah. I think I talked to her about it. I think she's excited about it. But so auditing is something that which if you're not auditing, you should be. Like it's to me, there's 3 parts of management: auditing, solving problems, and training. If you're not auditing, you're missing a third of what you should be doing as a manager, which nobody wants to audit. But just are good auditors, and they're kind of that utility player. I've seen them literally in any position in a company.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I would have the most fun just sitting in someone's businesses and telling them everything they're doing wrong and everything that they can do to fix it.
Yeah.
And then move on. right? I don't want to sit there and watch them fix
Right.
it.
Right.
I just want to tell them everything they're doing wrong and here are all the things you need to do.
Yeah.
Right. And then call me in 3 months.
Yep.
Right. I'd have the most fun doing that.
So that's where usually they sit in the business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then wouldn't that be an adapter?
It could be an adapter. Adapters are a little tough. Problem with adapters is that we can't predict their behavior. And that's what we're looking with predictive indexes. I'm predicting long-term job performance and I'm predicting behavior, and I can't predict an adapter's. I can't predict an adapter, especially, and we didn't talk about it too much, but the objective or subjective, which you understand, a subjective adapter is really tough because it's based on how they feel. So they can come in every day different based on how they feel.
So they're the most unpredictable profile.
Yes, extremely unpredictable. Objective adapters kind of fit into that individualist kind of profile. They
Got it.
kind of can bounce around a little bit from there. But if you're looking at individuals or an adapter, it's got to be like, I'm looking for a generalist that kind of can sit in a lot of. They're good. It's good to have one on the team that kind of can just slide into any role. You got a whole team full of them. They're a bunch of generalists. Kind of nobody's really great at anything.
Yeah.
You know, not to say you're not great at stuff, Steve. Sorry.
Well, no, I appreciate that. So my best friend who sold his company for a very large exit, he's an adapter. And it didn't make sense to me. Like, how are you an adapter? Like, you're so competitive. You're a natural salesperson. Like, how are you an adapter? It's just, he took the test twice.
Is he high E or low E?
I'm guessing he's in the middle. Maybe more, maybe lower E.
So-
lower E, probably.
Yeah, if the E is.
But he's not an emotional person. But he can.
Yeah.
But he can emote very well.
Gotcha. Yeah, if the that's another conversation, but it might be the E. But we didn't get into this, but the other half. So the number one predictor of job performance is cognitive ability.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about it because it's 42% predictor of long-term job performance. A resume is 12. It's not much to talk about it because they just take it and they either score above, but it's
a pass fail.
It's how fast do they solve a complex problem. It's not can they solve the problem. It's a misnomer. It's how fast. So I taught math. You finish a test in 20 minutes. I finish in 40 minutes. We both get 100%. Which one of us is smarter? We both got 100%. We both could solve all the problems.
Yeah.
Who has a higher cognitive score? Ability. You do. You did it in 20 minutes. I did it in 40. Just that's the difference between the two. A lot of people confuse them and think, oh, it's IQ, it's intelligence. No, it's how fast. I've seen low IQs with high cogs.
Really?
I know. Weird, right? Yeah.
So this is we're talking about my best friend. So we both went
Yeah.
to go get our master's degree in electrical engineering.
Okay.
Right. He got when we went to grad school, he had to take this test. So he got a perfect score on reasoning. I got the perfect score on math, and we were both neck and neck on the other stuff.
Huh.
But yeah, he was the
Interesting.
reasoning guy.
Yeah.
I was the math guy.
Huh.
So I wonder how that.
But I would wonder what I was getting to is I wonder where his cognitive is at.
I would imagine.
problems.
I mean, he's got a master's. I imagine his cog's pretty
Yeah,
good.
yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
But that's something that often I go into and people complain. They're like, my person on my team they ask me which profile solves problems, and it's not a profile; it's a cognitive score. And often we put people in roles that they're just not capable of solving the problem fast enough for what we need it to be solved.
Yeah, that's
From there, so if you're having a problem solving, it's not a profile. I'd be looking at cognitive out of the gate. Can they solve the problem the speed that we need them to solve it?
Wouldn't the A though be like, I won't give up until I solve the problem?
Okay, so all right. So the high A's all will tell you they're problem solvers, and they'll brag about the fact that they're problem solvers.
Solve problems for breakfast. No, eat problems for breakfast.
Yeah.
That's Stephanie's line.
But usually what it means is that they create problems so they can solve them. So low A's will look at it and be like me, for example, with Gary, cut this part out for Gary. It's like, I'll look at it and say, there was never a problem to start with. Why are you looking for a problem?
Right.
Because Gary was like, hey, I found this problem. And I think I have a way to solve it. And I'm like, why did you even go looking for a problem? There's nothing wrong with it. It's just fine. Just happened the other day. And he's like, but it's a problem. I'm like, but why did you even go looking? Right. So the high A's who say they're problem solvers are generally, because they're motivated, right? We're measuring motivation. They're motivated by problem solving. So therefore, they will create problems to solve them when problems don't exist and then say they're problem solvers.
Right.
Sorry, you're getting me on a soapbox right now.
Oh, you're good.
They have a behavior of problem solving. Is literally in PI, it's under behaviors. Behavior, what we see, is problem solving. It does not mean the low A's can't solve problems. It means the high A's have a behavior of it because they're almost looking for it. So really, when you're going to problem solving, that's what happens is they'll hire a high A thinking they're problem solvers, but then they have a low COG score. They're not capable of solving the problem as fast as the company needs it to be solved. Doesn't mean it can't be solved, just not as fast as the company needs it to be solved.
There is an inordinate number of times I'll say in the coaching call where someone's like, I have this problem. Like, how do I solve it? And I was like, I just want you to stop right there. That's not a problem to be solved. Right? Just back it up here. Like, how often is this happening? It's like, this is the first time it's happened. This is not a problem to be solved. Do not spend any more time on this.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You guys solved it. You're good. Do not have a prevention mechanism for this.
Yep. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
Right. 80% of the time, the process isn't going to, 20% of the time, the process isn't going to work, which is why you have managers to manage the 20% of the time it doesn't work.
Right.
We build out a lot of process maps, and people want this process map for all these contingencies. And I'm like, how often does that happen? Well, it happened one time. Then we're not putting it into the process map.
Right.
Because it's an anomaly that the manager will deal with when it comes up.
Exactly.
To your point.
All right. What is your biggest struggle today?
My biggest struggle, like personally, business, or just in general?
In general.
I think that's a tough question. I have to say, it's a good question. It's a tough question. And not that I don't have struggles, but how open do I want to be here? I think like anybody else, consistency. I think for me, I'm working a lot right now on leadership, and there's leadership and there's management. I prefer management, not leadership. Which for me, leadership is all the actually what people usually think is the good stuff. I look at people and like, you get paid on Friday to do your job, right? And leadership is to me is providing hope when there isn't any.
Interesting. I haven't heard that definition before.
Well, when you look at like, okay, I heard this that most entrepreneurs pre-World War II studied Napoleon, and post-World War II studied Napoleon and Churchill. It was the common thread amongst them.
Interesting.
Okay, so when you look at those two men, what did they do? They provided hope when there wasn't any, and that's what they're known for. You get Churchill, who's not going to last much longer. And he's out there in the streets of London telling everybody, bring it on, we got this, knowing full well that he's running out of food and ammunition. You got Napoleon with 125,000 men up against 600,000. Waterloo, what he's known for losing, almost wins.
Right.
With 125, outnumbered 6-1, with this kind of army, but somehow has convinced these guys that they're going to pull this off. And so over and over again, you see these men who are phenomenal leaders. And it was in the face of adversity, they were the ones up there providing hope, to everybody, knowing full well that they probably weren't going to win this. And that to me is the thing. As leaders in an organization, when you know the chips are down, what's your attitude with your team?
Yeah. Darren Hardy, I went through his training some time ago. And he says your job as a leader is you're a hope dealer. That's
a statement from Napoleon. Napoleon said leaders are dealers in hope.
Yeah.
Is from Napoleon. Yep. I heard that from him as well. And I've been studying those two quite a bit because it's just Roosevelt's another great one to study with it. That it's just like, Roosevelt's approach to leadership was pretty savage. But anyway,
yeah,
he had no problem leaving people behind. So
I didn't know that. What is your superpower?
Pattern recognition. In business. At this juncture, I've done this, worked with almost 1,000 companies.
You can connect the dots.
I can connect the dots, and I'm pretty good at it. When I go in, and I kind of always been that way. The math brain, you have a math brain, just that way. You just math is about solving problems and connecting dots. And I would say that's my superpower when I go into things. I connect dots really fast.
My understanding is that's one of the main definitions of intelligence. Pattern recognition.
Yep.
Right?
Well, they say that's what intuition is. Intuition is actually subconscious pattern recognition.
Yeah.
So when you have intuition, it's just you don't recognize, it's a pattern you see, you just don't remember that you saw it. So either way, IQ is just pattern recognition.
Yeah.
So when you have business IQ It's because you recognize the patterns in business. When you have social IQ, you recognize the social, patterns.
Yeah.
It's just IQ is pattern recognition. Just where do you have your IQ at, from there.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because like, if you look at like the Myers-Briggs, like I'm not an intuitive person, but I have enough data
Yeah.
where I just know like, nope, this is wrong. This is what's happening.
Yep.
I can't explain it.
Right.
It's not intuition.
Yeah.
It's just I have enough life experience, like we were saying earlier. Like you and I are both extremely jaded from enough experience to say, no, something bad is about to happen, and it's probably going to look like this.
Yeah. I don't know how many a week. I mean, 25 businesses a week. I'm analyzing for pattern recognition and working with teams and people, whether I'm virtual or on site. And at this point, it's I work a lot on the people component side of things, whether I'm doing predictive index, whether I'm helping with hiring, whether I'm employee reviews. It's done it thousands of times at this point. And there's times where I'm sitting in a meeting and somebody just does something. It's and it's something I've seen before, and I don't know, but I remember one time I was in a meeting, and a guy, he did something, and I'm like, as soon as he did it, I'm like, I pulled up his LinkedIn. He was looking for a job. And the owner was next to me. Actually, I was here in Phoenix. And I turned and like, the guy, there was something there that just triggered it.
Yeah.
And I can't explain why, and I can't teach it to anybody, but it was just, there's enough in there at this point now of connecting dots that when they do something, it's like, which is what's hard in hiring, is we think, oh, I've seen that before. And usually most people haven't hired enough to really see it.
Right. Well, Brandon's talked about it. And then Gary, I mean, he had it. He came here in this very room. We ran a quarterly meeting.
Yeah.
And he's like, and he knew the cancer in the room. He just kept picking at the guy. And at the end of a quarterly, the guy quit.
Yeah.
He just knew. And he wouldn't let that guy alone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just something that it's repetition, right? Repetition is the key to learning. Go to my education background. And so you just have to see it enough times. And anyway, that's
So I want you to think about a message you want to leave everybody with, right? Guys, if you guys got value out of the show, again, please subscribe. A rising tide lifts all boats. We're working hard to create millionaires, and the best way for us to do that is to get our message out there. And again, Austin's here to coach my team, so I can't emphasize the value enough with Sharper Business Solutions. I wouldn't be where I'm at today. You guys bring a ton of value, so I appreciate you guys. What are some last thoughts you want to leave all the listeners with?
I would just tell them, because I do a lot with hiring, is hire for positions, not people. And I know it's a people business, and I said that. But look at the position you're hiring for, design that position, and then find the person. Take your time, find the person who fits that position. And then I probably sign off with clients with this statement more than like any other statement, which is said to me, is that winning is fun, so go have fun.
There you go. If somebody wants to connect with you, how would they best do that?
Yeah, sharperbusiness.com. It's a great way to reach out to us. I'm on, I think, all the social media platforms. I got people who home marketing department manages that as well, so that too. Austin at sharperprocess.com is always a great way to reach out to me directly as well.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much.
Hey, appreciate it, Steve.
Appreciate you guys for watching.
Shout
See you
out
guys
to
next time.
Steve Trang. Jump on the Steve Trang. Disruptors.